Ahlazar, just last word to you. I do take exception to some of the way the debate went and what I considered race baiting, but I do appreciate that you sought to come in prepared, that you made an effort to conduct yourself in a gentlemanly way when I called you out. So I appreciate that, and I'd like to get to know you better personally, one-on-one.
Yeah, definitely. Just to respond to the last thing Dr. Brown said, yeah, I hope I made a friend in you this evening, Dr. Michael Brown.
The thesis of the debate that will be resolved is the 12 tribes chart, or Ashkenazi Jews, who's legit children of Israel. That's the full title that we agreed upon. Sometimes it was shortened just for clarity, just for brevity's sake, but that's the full title, the 12 tribes chart, or Ashkenazi Jews, who's the legit children of Israel. And we're going to hear a very fascinating discussion because both men have to defend something and both men are able to also criticize something. So I think it's very full orb that way. And that's why it has that long title. Apologist. Give it up for Dr. Brown being here, everybody. All right, that's that. I don't think we got any questions, but you do need to hear the format. The debaters are familiar with it, but now you, the audience, need to know. Opening statements. 35 minutes total, 17 minutes each. We did a coin toss earlier. I met up with Ahlazar during Super Bowl weekend, and the way the coin toss worked out with what we had agreed to was Dr. Brown goes first. So Dr. Brown is first, then Ahlazar. That's opening statements. First rebuttals, 20 minutes total, 10 minutes each. Dr. Brown, followed by Ahlazar. Second rebuttal, 20 minutes total, 10 minutes each. Dr. Brown, followed by Ahlazar. Cross-examination, where they're able to ask each other questions. And the rules there are no longer than 30 seconds to question, answer no longer than 2 minutes each. Dr. Brown will first have 10 minutes to ask Ahlazar questions, and Ahlazar has 10 minutes to ask Dr. Brown questions. Closing statements, 5 minutes each. Dr. Brown goes first. Ahlazar has the final word. Then we open it up briefly to the audience Q&A. We're going to read them from the screen. We're not bringing people into the room, and it's going to alternate. Dr. Brown, Ahlazar, Dr. Brown, Ahlazar, like that. And the way it'll work is questions no longer than 30 seconds, as we said before. And we're gonna hold on. I have a little thing I need to read about that last thing you sent me. Where did it go? As far as the Q&A, and we're gonna put the questions on the screen. So that'll be I think primarily Brother BEREAN is the one able to do that. And the way it works like this, it's gonna be alternating fashion, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer. If the question is directed to you, then the other person has up to 1 minute to give a response if they want to. And then it switches reverse. We continue on that way. Sorry, I had to bring that up for a second. And then we're going to give a little chance for the debaters to show you where to follow them, their socials, that kind of thing. And Brother BEREAN's going to have a final word, and we're going to call it a night. So that's it. Any questions for me from anybody? That sounds like we're good. Okay, are we able to set up the PowerPoint for the first opening statement? I know that there are presentations that each person has for their opening statement. Once it is set up and you begin speaking, Dr. Brown, then I will start the timer. I'll give you a 2 minute warning and then tell you when time is. I'll simply say time. And I'll either go like this in the screen or say 2 minutes if I have an open mic at that 2 minute mark when you only have 2 minutes left, and then time. That's it for that part. Once the screen is set up, you begin speaking. I begin the time.
Hey, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Brother BEREAN, for hosting this, Vocab for setting up, and, of course, Ahlazar for stepping forward to do this. Yeah. I just want to give a quick bit of history in terms of how this is set up. Here and there on my radio show, I talk about Hebrew Israelite issues, and I constantly be challenged in YouTube comments, why are you afraid to debate us? And I said, I'm not. I just need someone to debate. So I've said that for a few years. It has to be qualified so they can represent their position well. When Ahlazar stepped forward to do it, of course, very, very happy to do it. Now, I want to talk first to people on, quote, my side. Some of you might say, why are you debating this guy? Man, he's a street thug. Man, he's just dangerous, inflammatory, racist rhetoric. Well, for sure, I take very strong issue with some of the rhetoric that I've heard on the street from Ahlazar. I don't expect to hear that tonight. But the fact is, there are millions of people in America that seem to have similar sentiments. He's a recognized leader, and I absolutely know he came in prepared. So hear what he has to say and evaluate it based on facts and information. Now, there's some that might be on Ahlazar's side, and you're not going to listen to me because of the color of my skin. I mean, that's as dumb as being wheeled into an emergency ward and you decide to die rather than let a white doctor help you. So if skin color is going to get in the way of listening, then the devil's already won. So I've been introduced by Ahlazar very graciously as a PhD and a scholar and all of that. So hear me out, and then may truth triumph. That is the request. So just so you know, my overall position, absolutely, there are Black Jews and Hispanic Jews. I'm not debating that at all. I am saying that the 12-tribe chart itself is completely bogus, and that, yes, Ashkenazi Jews are among other Jews. Yes, they are legitimate Israelites. All right, so let's put the PowerPoint up, and I'll begin my presentation. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to do is first debunk a sample of the worst errors on the chart, and then we'll demonstrate that Ashkenazi Jews are authentic descendants of Israel. I'm fine with basing our debate on patrilineal descent, meaning we trace Israelite heritage through the father. I'm fine with that. I may have some related questions later on, but we'll proceed with the patrilineal argument. Now, as for the chart, it's flawed in many obvious ways, including sweeping generalizations, glaring omissions, including the omission of Mizrahi Jews, some of whom had a continuous documented presence in the Middle East for over 2,500 years, among others, and insupportable claims. Of course, the chart you're familiar with, I'm sure Ahlazar will be getting into it more as we go on. Now, if any part of the chart is false, then the chart cannot be trusted. Keep this in mind throughout the debate. And over the course of Ahlazar's presentation, listen carefully for factual, historically verifiable, conclusive evidence that connects the different groups of this chart to the specific tribes of Israel listed, not general alleged connections or highly suspect historical anecdotes or convoluted biblical interpretations, but clear, indisputable, historical, scriptural, and genetic connections to each specific tribe. Hang on, there we go. That evidence doesn't exist. And if any point he raises seems to have substance, I'll address it during the times of rebuttal. The Alliance for Black Jews, by the way, claims that there are roughly 200,000 Black American Jews, meaning roughly 0.5% of African Americans. And yes, of course, there are Hispanic Jews, but that is something very different from what the chart claims. So first proof that the chart is bogus, it contradicts Deuteronomy 28:62. There it's written to Israel in exile, "You shall be left a scant few after having been as numerous as the stars in the skies, because you did not heed the command of your God Yahweh." Yet, according to the 12 tribes chart, there are at least 400 million Israelites today, including 47 million African Americans, 185 million Central Americans, 126 million Mexicans, 11 million Haitians, and 11 million Cubans. This is anything but few in number. Even if you say, well, the chart doesn't mean that every single person in every single group is an Israelite, you have to acknowledge that the vast majority are not Israelites, in which case you've shot yourself in the foot. Just this one fact disqualifies the chart, especially when you compare this number of more than 400 million alleged Israelites with the Jewish population today of about 15 million people, which group is dramatically fewer in number. Also, Africans were brought to America from several different parts of the continent, which means that those various parts of Africa must have been Israelite as well, potentially adding several hundred million to the number of alleged true Israelites alive today. This is hardly few in number. Second proof, the chart relies on bogus connections. One of the proofs that Issachar is Mexico, this is from a speech, a 3-hour YouTube lecture that Ahlazar gave in July of 2022, I believe. One of the proofs that Issachar is Mexico today is the alleged Hebrew derivation of Azteca from 2 Hebrew words meaning time and congregation, which would supposedly connect them to the sons of Issachar in 1 Chronicles 12:32, who understood the times and seasons. This is utter nonsense. Hebrew Oz means then. It is not a noun meaning time. And there is no Hebrew word teka. Instead, there is a verb tacha, which likely means to follow. Encyclopedia Britannica also points out that the name Aztec is derived from Aztlan, variously translated as white land, land of white herons, or place of herons, an allusion to their origins probably in northwestern Mexico. Similar errors, which are blatant falsehoods and not simply matters of interpretation, undermine the chart on every score. Plus, there is no literary or genetic or linguistic connection between Mexico and Issachar. And I don't say this to mock as much as to help those who really want truth from the Most High. In fact, there's not a stitch. Oh, hang on. Looks like we skipped a slide here. So next proof, Haiti is not Levi. And in fact, there's not a stitch of concrete evidence connecting the Haitians to the Levites, any more than there's a factual connection between any of the peoples of this chart and the specific tribes of Israel that are claimed. Deuteronomy 33:10 says about Haiti, not about Haiti, about Levi, they shall teach your laws to Jacob and your instructions to Israel. They shall offer you incense to savor and whole offerings on your altar. Well, Haiti is not teaching the children of Israel the laws of God. Haiti is not observing the seventh-day Sabbath. They don't follow the Torah. They don't circumcise their sons on the eighth day. They don't eat only biblically kosher food, let alone teach all Israel to follow the Torah. Haiti is not Levi. In point of fact, I can add this. There's a slide of mine that got missed along the way, that according to the Bible, the Levites were scattered among all the different tribes of Israel. So there's no possible way they all end up starting in one place in a small island off the coast of America, and then from there go out, completely against history on every level. Fourth proof, Native Americans are not Reuven or Gad. DNA studies, some of them published by former Mormon leaders, make clear that these peoples have an East Asian or Siberian descent, not a Middle Eastern or even African descent. This was a revelation for these former Mormons, since the Book of Mormon, like the 12 tribes chart, claims that Native Americans were actually Israelites. This information caused these leaders to leave Mormonism behind. So in point of fact, and there's a great study, I'll put the copy of the book up, Losing a Lost Tribe. In point of fact, the Mormons agreed with the 12 tribes chart in terms of the Native Americans being original Israelites. It's bogus. That's why they left Mormonism. And to repeat, there's not a stitch of factual evidence, including solid linguistic evidence, to connect any Native American people with Reuven or God. This is pure fiction. And note that large-scale genetic studies indicate that these Native Americans were here on our continent even before Israel was formed as a nation. Here's one example. Science Magazine, November 2018, points to that. Fifth proof, the chart contradicts Deuteronomy 28:68. And this is just a sampling of what could be dozens and dozens of truths. Deuteronomy 28:68, you're familiar with it. Yahweh will send you back to Egypt in galleys by a route which I told you should not see again. There you shall offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but none will buy. This verse does not apply to anyone on this chart, especially not Mexicans or Seminole Indians or Central Americans, among others. Not at all. They were never slaves in Egypt, let alone sent by ship back to Egypt as slaves. As for the idea that Egypt sometimes does not refer to a physical place in the Old Testament, but rather to any place of slavery and bondage, that too is completely bogus, which I can easily demonstrate if this point is challenged. In fact, if you just read two more verses into Deuteronomy 29, verse 2, Moses tells you that this refers to literal Egypt. Now, before I go further here, I do want to point out that the ancient Jews were sold back into Egypt in ships, according to Josephus and other early Jewish historians, as far as what happened in the first century after the destruction of the temple. Sixth proof, the chart ignores the real Jews who preserve the Hebrew Bible and Hebrew language. It is the people that the world recognizes as Jews today who suffered the terrible curses of Deuteronomy 28. Not all the peoples listed on the chart who, to repeat, with rare exception, have no connection whatsoever to ancient Israel. This, of course, does not minimize for a second the horrible sufferings of African Americans or Native Americans in the past, nor does it deny that some African Americans descended from Israel. It is simply to point out who really fulfills the sad history of Deuteronomy 28. Now, contrast this complete lack of genetic, biological, historical, traditional, or ritual connection to ancient Israel from the vast majority of those listed on the chart with the fact that those recognized by the world today as Jews, among whom are millions of Ashkenazi Jews, have continued to maintain Jewish identity through the millennia despite horrific persecution. They have been persecuted as Jews for more than 2,000 years and kicked out of countries because they are Jews. This is highly significant when you remember how difficult and unpopular it has been to be a Jew over the last 2,000 years. I can assure you that there were no blacks and Latino Hebrew Israelites standing on street corners in Nazi-controlled Europe shouting, "We are the real Jews." These real Jews have observed the Sabbath, kept the dietary laws, and practiced circumcision on the 8th day. They have genealogical connections to ancient Israel, historical connections, traditional connections, and DNA connections, confirming the priestly genealogical connections in particular. And these Jews, who are real Jews, as opposed to some of the fake Jews on the chart, have preserved the Hebrew scriptures and Hebrew language, as opposed to the completely mythical so-called Lashon Kodesh, which I'll call LQ from here. And while I understand we're not debating here the legitimacy of this modern, totally made-up pronunciation, this does tie in with the question of authenticity. Since if the pronunciation of LQ is true, which it is not, then every speaker of every Semitic language throughout history and until today is wrong, since similar grammatical and morphological and phonetic principles apply across these languages. If the pronunciation of LQ is accurate, which it is not, then every recognized Hebrew and Semitic grammar and lexicon is wrong, along with every Semitic place name on every map, including place names like Jerusalem and Judah, and every transcription of Hebrew in the Greek Septuagint and the Greek New Testament, including the names of the 12 tribes in Revelation 7, they're all wrong if LQ is right. In short, LQ contradicts every Semitic language spoken or written in history because it is a recent Hebrew Israelite invention, and we can trace vocalization back to ancient times. This calls into question the Hebrew Israelite claim to authenticity, since the same Hebrew Israelites who purport to have the true pronunciation of Hebrew also purport to have the true information about the 12 tribes. Ahlazar actually claims that real Hebrew is, quote, a bastardized version of LQ. So we're not debating LQ tonight. It's a bogus pronunciation. We're debating authenticity. And if you have the language wrong, you can bet you got the other things wrong as well. So without a doubt, the 12 tribes chart is bogus. But are my ancestors really related to ancient Israel? If so, why are we white-skinned when certainly ancient Israelites were not white? Some claim that we're descendants of the Khazars who allegedly converted en masse to Judaism in the 9th century, but that theory has been thoroughly debunked along several lines, including genetic, historical, and linguistic. And if the Khazar argument is raised, I'll be glad to rebut it. As for the Hebrew name Ashkenazi in the Bible, it refers to an entirely different people having nothing to do with Europe, referring most likely to the Scythians and now extinct people in Central Asia. So first proof of our authenticity, DNA confirms the authenticity of Ashkenazi Jews. As for the most comprehensive recent DNA study of Ashkenazi Jews, spearheaded by geneticists from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem at Harvard Medical School and published November 30th, 2022, it confirms that we can trace our lineage back to first century Jewish communities in Italy, which would include those sold as slaves into Rome, as well as earlier Jewish communities there, which Acts mentions. And here's a reference to the study. Subsequently, as Italians converted, married into Judaism, our European skin color became part of our heritage. Then, as these Jews made their way into other parts of Europe and settled there, the same process continued, explaining our Caucasian complexion. But the same process occurred with African Jews or Hispanic Jews or Asian Jews, all of whom reflect other peoples marrying into the people of Israel, hence the many different colors and ethnicities of Jews worldwide, in contrast with the original brown-skinned Israelites. For the record, even if you argue that the original Israelites were black, then there had to be conversion and intermarriage to explain the other ethnic and racial groups on the chart. But not only does DNA in general give us a clear link back to ancient Israel, the fact is, as I mentioned before, Ashkenazi Jews who are of priestly descent share the same priestly gene as do Lemba Jews in Africa and Sephardi Jews worldwide. How could this be unless our Kohanim, our priests, actually descended from a common priestly ancestor? If Ashkenazi Jews have no genetic connection to Israel, then where did we acquire this gene?
Less than 2 minutes.
Note also that geneticists have pointed out that the Y chromosome, meaning the paternal, the fatherly chromosome of most Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews, contains mutations that are common among Middle Eastern peoples, but uncommon in the general European population. This suggests that the paternal lineages of Ashkenazi Jews could be traced mostly to the Middle East. These geneticists add that diaspora Jews from Europe, Northwest Africa, and the Near East resemble each other more closely than they resemble their non-Jewish neighbors. Put it another way, Ashkenazi Jews originated in the Middle East. Second proof, Ashkenazi Jews have lived by the Torah and Jewish tradition. So just ask, Who has kept the traditions through the centuries? Who has passed on the Hebrew language? Who has passed on the Hebrew scriptures? And who is it that continues the traditions of the Pharisees in the New Testament who rejected Jesus? Sadly, those are my ancestors, the Ashkenazi Jews, going straight back to biblical times. And then lastly, God has brought us back to the land of Israel in accordance with his promises. Yeshua made clear in Matthew 23 that a Jewish Jerusalem must welcome him back. So the question is, who is it that God brought back to Israel and controls Jerusalem today? It's Sephardi Jews and Ashkenazi Jews and Mizrahi Jews and Ethiopian Jews, among others. And as for the sufferings these Jewish people have endured, including Ashkenazi Jews, our pain is as great as the pain of any people through history. So I could expand on all these points at great length, along with expose more of the fallacies of the chart. Listen carefully to Ahlazar. Listen for concrete, clear, undeniable proof. And anything that raises a question, I will address it in the rebuttal. Thank you for your time and your attention.
About 3 seconds left. Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Brown, for your opening statement. Ahlazar, once you begin speaking, that's when I start the timer, and not until then. But once he does, it is 17 minutes. Just like Dr. Brown, I will give you a 2-minute warning as well. I believe that is all that needs to be said. This is the second opening statement by Guerrilla Hebrew, Ahlazar, and he has 17 minutes. The floor is yours.
All right. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, all honor, and all glory to the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, whose name in the Hebrew is Yahweh. Right. I do so in the name of his only begotten Son, who the world knows as Jesus Christ, whose name in the ancient Hebrew is Yahweh Shai. I'm Chief Priest Ahlazar BanLawya, the Guerrilla Hebrew. I'm just a high school dropout, convicted felon, street thug, and I just kind of want to walk y'all through some stuff tonight. So, who are the legit children of Israel? Right? That's a nice question. First and foremost, I want to take you guys here to Revelations 2:9, right? And it reads, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Somebody is perpetrating a fraud. Somebody is going around saying they are Jews and are not. And I like to take this into consideration. Romans 3:4. God forbid, yea, let God be true, but every man a liar. Tonight, we are going to let the word of God be the final authority on who, in fact, is the true Jew and who is the synagogue of Satan. Right? Isaiah 8:20. Look to God's instructions and teachings. People who contradict his word are completely in the dark. So after we take a look at all of this evidence for who is the legit children of Israel, the 12 tribes chart of the Ashkenazi Jews, right? Whoever's identity contradicts the word of God, that's the people who are in the dark, right? So again, I want to reiterate tonight's topic, right? And that is, who are the legit children of Israel? Legit, of course, is short for legitimate. Legitimate means conforming to the law or to rules. It's important, right? So, and who are the children of Israel? Let's define that. Israel is a man who was originally named Jacob. This is a debate about who is legitimately his child, children, or offspring. This is not about who was allowed to convert to Judaism. I want to make that clear. It's about who the legitimate offspring. How do we establish if somebody's a legitimate offspring of Jacob or Israel? It's very simple. Numbers 1:18. And they assembled all the congregation together on the first day, on the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, as Dr. Michael Brown himself has already affirmed. Ezra 2:9 affirms it also. It says, but they cannot shew their father's house and their seed, whether they were of Israel. One more, of course, here we have Leviticus 24:10, where we have an Israelitish woman. She has a son by an Egyptian, and he is juxtaposed from the children of Israel in two different instances here in this verse in Leviticus 24:10. Right? So I want to take you guys to a man by the name of Dr. Henry Abramson. Right? And he's notable for his teachings on Jewish history and Judaism as a religion. He was assistant and later associate professor of history and Jewish studies at the Florida Atlantic University from 96 to 06. And during that time, he held appointments at a number of prestigious universities such as Oxford, Cornell, Harvard, and Hebrew University. He received his PhD in history from the University of Toronto. Dr. Michael Brown has even recently referenced his work on his Line of Fire show to assist a caller in understanding Jews in the diaspora, right? So he's a very qualified man and somebody who Dr. Michael Brown recognizes as credible, right? When describing the founding and genetic bottleneck event for the Ashkenazi Jews, he names the Kalanimus family as the nucleus thereof. Sometime around the year 800 CE, a small group of Jews, he says, left northern Italy. The Kalanimus family, for example, they made their way to the Rhineland in contemporary Germany. Those people formed the nucleus of Ashkenazi Jewry. So according to Dr. Henry Aberson, this Kalanimus family is a former of the nucleus of Ashkenazi Jewry. And this, coincidentally enough, is a symbol of the Kalanimus family, which is an eagle. Right? Now, let's go to the Jewish Virtual Library and see what they had to say about the Kalanimus family. The Kalanimus, one of the most eminent Jewish families in Germany, which flourished from the 9th to 13th century, especially in the cities near the Rhine. Among its members were numerous rabbis, preachers, poets, teachers, authors, moralists, and theologians. And most of the prominent communal leaders of this period came from its ranks. The origin of that family go back to the 8th century Italy. Notice it's Italy they go back to, not Israel, Italy. Although the name Kalanimus appeared in Talmudic literature, the father of Onkelos, the great translator of the Bible, was, according to Ahlazar 11a, called Kalanimus. So we're tracking this history of this Kalanimus family, right? So they reference the oldest Kalanimus member who's referenced in Talmudic literature. So let's go to this Talmudic literature and read what it says about the origins of this Kalanimus family. The Gemara mentions other Romans who converted to Judaism. It relates Onkelos bar Kalanamos converted to Judaism. So according to Dr. Henry Aberson, the Jewish Virtual Library, and the Talmud, the Ashkenazi Jews were founded by a family of Italian Roman converts. They cannot be the legit children of Israel. They can't, right? So this is who I am saying is the legit children of Israel. And it's very clear through some of the things said in Dr. Brown's opening round that he doesn't actually understand the claims being made here. At no point are we claiming that this is the absolute for all of the Israelites in the world. At no point, right? But this is the people who we believe are affected here in the Americas and are Israelites in the Americas. This doesn't count for any other parts of the world, but we do emphatically take the stance that the Ashkenazi Jews are not Israelites, right? So again, Judah, the African Americans, Benjamin, the Commonwealth and Dutch Caribbean, Levi, the Haitians, Simeon, Dominicans, Zebulun, the Central Americans, Ephraim, Puerto Ricans, Manasseh, Cubans, Gad, Native Americans, Reuben, Seminole Indians, Naphtali, indigenous Argentinian and Chileans, Asher, Native Colombian and Uruguayans, Issachar, Mexicans. Right? Dr. Brown affirms, as he's already said, that the Israelites of antiquity were not white. There was not a single white Jew until roughly the 8th century AD. And the Igbo of Nigeria have a valid claim to Israelite descent, which basically is a virtual forfeiture of this debate. I'll explain later. Right? He also just today said there's no doubt that there are both black and Hispanic Jews, also a virtual forfeiture. Right? He also says the Israelites were not white, but they were also not black, but brown. But if you take a look at our chart here, which I in this version of the chart that I cultivated, Spirit got on me to cultivate, all praise to the Most High for it, and that he already referenced. If you pay attention, the median color of this chart is brown. So this actually also validates our stance, right? Moving on. Let's go back to the Igbo, though, because he said the Igbo have a valid claim to being Israelites. The Igbo became one of the principal ethnic groups to be enslaved during the Atlantic slave trade. So one of the greatest ethnic groups that is a contributor to the Atlantic slave trade are the Igbo, and they make up for a large deal, especially the majority of African Americans are of Igbo descent, right? Now, according to the foundational narratives taken from Igbo oral tradition, they say that some Jews left Judah in the periods of the destruction of the first and second temples and migrated to Nigeria. So this means that according to their oral traditions, they are of the southern kingdom, exactly who we say they are. So the Igbo maintained that they were of the southern kingdom and they were a great contributor to the slaves that were brought over here to the United States of America and the Caribbean, which would explain why we say Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, right, according to tradition and genetics, are the tribes that are the so-called black tribes, the ones that were brought over here from West Africa, right? So there's traditions and genetics, things that he says we didn't have that substantiate that. But wait, there's more, right? It's Ezekiel 4:5-6. I want to go into some biblical prophecy here, and again, let the word of God speak to really identify us and disqualify the Ashkenazim from, of course, being the legitimate children of Israel, right? I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days, you will bear the sin of the people of Israel. After you have finished this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the people of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. So the Most High God has the prophet Ezekiel lay on each of his sides to represent a judgment for the sins of Israel that will happen, right? One for 390 days, the other for 40 days. We take 390, we add 40, we have 430. So this represents 430 consecutive years of a specific judgment for the transgressions of the nation of Israel, right? Now, coincidentally enough, in the 1440s, we see the start of the European slave trade in Africa. And in the 1870s, we see the importation of slaves from Africa coming to an end in the Americas, the Atlantic slave trade, right? So if we take 1870, we minus it by 1440, we get 430 years of that judgment that God pronounced on the nation of Israel. And this, of course, affected all the people on the chart, right? Because not only did you have West Africans kidnapped and taken from West Africa and brought over here, you had Taino Indians that were shipped to Spain. You had Native Americans of the Pequot tribe of New England taken and shipped down to Cuba. You had Mayans shipped down to Cuba, et cetera, et cetera. So this affected all people, so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian collectively for 430 years. I would love for Dr. Brown tonight to demonstrate us a 430-year type of judgment that his people, the Ashkenazim, experienced. Moving on. Isaiah 42:22, it reads, but his people, right, God's people, have been robbed and plundered, enslaved, imprisoned, and trapped. They are fair game for anyone and have no one to protect them, no one to take them back home. So let's analyze this here, right? Black and Hispanic people have undoubtedly been robbed and spoiled, have been enslaved, and then take a look at this term, imprisoned, right? The United States of America presently has more prisoners than any other country on the face of the planet Earth. And who are the predominant people that are incarcerated in the United States of America? Oh, Black and Hispanic people, right? And trapped. We've been trapped so much that now we call our own neighborhoods the trap, right? They are fair game for anyone and have no one to protect them. I want to analyze that, right? We just turn the clock back a few months now, and we see what happened to Kyrie Irving and Kanye West for the things that they simply said about Jewish people, right? Now, we also see just a year or two ago an anti-Asian hate bill get passed. But Black and Hispanic and Native Indian people have seen more hatred, more oppression, more violence than any other group of people on the soils of America, yet there has never been a bill specifically passed to protect us. Why? Because as the Bible says, we don't have anyone to protect us. And here's the key: no one to take them back home. In 1948, the Ashkenazi Jews apparently got taken back home. But according to prophecy, no one is supposed to take you back home, right? That goes back to, remember what I said, Isaiah 8:20, whoever's identity contradicts the word of God, that's who is in darkness. I think that's being very clearly illustrated and demonstrated before you now. If we take a look at the context of Isaiah 42, I watched a very interesting debate between Dr. Michael Brown and a rabbi about Christ in the Old Testament, right? And in that, he identifies the fact that he can make a case that the context of Isaiah 42 is actually messianic because verse 1 talks about this righteous servant and him coming to save. So that's actually the context. We're talking about what Christ is coming to do when he's coming to save his people. Right? If anybody tries to play a game and say, oh, well, this happened in Babylon. No. The context is dealing with that righteous servant and his deliverance of this entire chapter. I just want to make that clear, right? Now, there's been talk about DNA. Oh, there's been talk about DNA. And it's funny that there's been so much talk about DNA. I knew he was going to do this, right? So now I don't subscribe to the idea that this there's DNA that can actually trace anybody back anywhere in antiquity. I don't subscribe to that whatsoever, but he does. But there's a problem with that. So the problem with DNA, according to sequencing.com, which is a leading DNA research company, Jewishness is more difficult to identify in genetic testing than other ethnic groups. This is because there is no specific gene that makes a person Jewish. Also, straightforward DNA examination cannot conclusively tell a person whether or not they are Jewish descent or a part of a Jewish population. So what's interesting is one of his objections to the 12 tribe chart was, well, you cannot demonstrate a genetic connection between these people, but it is impossible for anybody to actually demonstrate a genetic connection between any modern people and the ancient Israelites. That cannot be done. So he's asking me to do something that is not only impossible, but something that his people cannot do either, right? Moving on. Another problem with DNA. According to Raphael Falk, an Ashkenazi Jew and geneticist who is professor of genetics at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Is he qualified enough for you? There is no Jewish genotype to identify. Also, same guy, Raphael Falk, again, an Ashkenazi Jew who is a geneticist and professor at the Hebrew University. Also, there is no agreed upon criterion to identify Jews, and samples examined for the distribution of biological or molecular markers all depend on the preconceived biases of the investigators. I want everybody to make sure they understand that loud and clear. This is an Ashkenazi Jew who is a geneticist and a professor, and he says these conclusions that are being came to by these Jews that allegedly affirm their identity with DNA are all depend on preconceived biases. I mean, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm just a high school dropout. What do I know? But here is this person who is an Ashkenazi Jew and geneticist. And he says that these markers that they're trying to purport, demonstrate that they are Jews, all depend on preconceived biases. 1:30 left. That's crazy, right? But here I am. I'm supposed to believe what Dr. Michael Brown is doing. You see him shuffling now, don't you? Y'all see him live shuffling. He's shuffling for that. You know why? I need him to deal with this. I need him to deal with why one of his own brethren, who is a professor of geneticists in Israel, would say this about them if it wasn't true. Right? And mind you, this is via an article that was published in Frontiers in Genetics. This is a peer-reviewed scientific journal on genetics. This isn't just a Google article. This is peer-reviewed scholastic research. Let's keep going. Now, he also brought up linguistics. The problem with DNA and linguistics. In 2017, Paul Wexler, an Ashkenazi Jew and a linguist, and is a professor of linguistics at Tel Aviv University in Israel, along with a few other scholars, published an article in Frontiers of Genetics called The Origin of Ashkenazic Jews, and Yiddish. They came to some interesting conclusions with their findings, right? So again, here is an Ashkenazi Jew who is a linguist and a professor at another prestigious university in the country of Israel, right? And he did a genetic and linguistic test. Remember, because Dr. Michael Brown also utilizes linguistics as evidence to validate the legitimacy of Ashkenazi Jews as children of Israel. So let's see what they found in 2017. And I guarantee that this scholarship and these studies are more up to date than the ones he's utilizing to affirm the Ashkenazi Jews' legitimacy as Israelites.
That is time. That has been 17 minutes on the dot. All right. Thank you very much.
Did I get my 2-minute warning?
Yeah. We put on the screen. I said it in the mic too.
My fault.
I was trying to. I did it when you took a pause, so I said 1.5 minutes because I don't think you saw me when I did that. But yeah. Okay. So there we go. Thank you, Ahlazar. I appreciate that very much. We are going to enter into the first rebuttal. The way rebuttals are supposed to work. It's not supposed to be introduction of new information. It is supposed to be a response follow-up to what has been presented thus far. That's the way rebuttals are supposed to work. So we have two of these back to back. Of course, Dr. Brown goes first, Ahlazar goes second. And so it's 20 minutes total, 10 minutes each. So Dr. Brown, are you ready for your 10-minute rebuttal? Just a minute. Let me set this timer. I got to change it from 17 to 10. I'm going to start as soon as you start speaking, and then I will mute myself. Go ahead. It's your first rebuttal.
All right, boy, I'm really disappointed. It even gets into personal attacks. You see him shuffle. Ahlazar, I thought you were going to step higher than that. I encourage you to do so, because all it does is disqualify your position. I concede at nothing, forfeit at nothing. And in point of fact, some of the points you make are bizarre beyond belief. Let's start with Harry Abramson. You completely misrepresented what he said. He did not say that the Jews go back to Onkelos, a convert, and the source from Jewish Virtual Library didn't say that either. He said things can be traced back to Colonibus in Italy. And then if you look to Harry Abramson, his most recent videos, you know that he says that the most recent major studies just from the end of last year, so absolutely up to date, have been released. All right. And this is by a large team of geneticists. They have said, yes, we can trace these people back to Italy in the 1st century, and then we can trace them genetically back to ancient Middle Eastern people. What you said about Onkelos is a name similar to Colonimus. That's all it is. It's not saying it's the same descent. All it's saying, where do we find the name Colonimus earlier? There's a similar name to it in the Talmud, but others have different names for it. He's not tracing it back. You completely misrepresented what he said. Folks, check the sources. And you want to see if Harry Abramson agrees with Ahlazar. Actually, absolutely not. And by the way, when I said Hebrew Israelites, I'm talking about the One West, those in the 90s identified actually as Black Hebrew Israelites. Just for clarity, I'm not speaking of all Hebrew Israelites, because I know many of you have the sense to completely reject the bogus chart. I didn't mention the Igbos specifically, but remember, if what you're saying is true, if what Ahlazar is saying is true, then the chart cannot possibly refer to legitimate children of Israel, because God said you'll be left scant, few in number. All right, not 400, 500, 600 million, whatever the total number would be. That alone disqualifies it. Absolutely 100%. Let's hear a specific response to that. Also, oral traditions were mentioned, right? Like the Lemba people. They're in South Africa now, Bantu-speaking background Lemba people. They had a tradition that they came from ancient Israel, and the Buba clan, particularly among them, that they were of priestly descent. And here's what DNA found. DNA found that a large percentage of their men, because it is paternal, is through the father that priestly descent is made, that a large percentage of the men had this Y chromosome that was unique. And they also did a survey of Jews who, through tradition of the centuries, have said, yes, last name of Cohen, things like that. They traced themselves back to the ancient priestly tribe and priestly family of Aaron. And when you actually go through it, what do you discover? That over 50% of Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardi Jews who identified as Kohanim have the same priestly gene as do the Lemba people. How does that happen? Because genetics can tell you certain things very, very clearly and can point to common origins in the Middle East. Again, you want a list of geneticists. This is the list I was looking for. This is on the most recent study, some of the premier geneticists in the world. I can put it up for you. It's too much just to grab in 1 second and take me all day to read it. Some of the most prestigious folks in the world have said, yes, we can trace Jews back very accurately now, Ashkenazi Jews very accurately, to an ancient Middle Eastern heritage. Here's the other thing DNA can tell you, that the Ashkenazi Jews have things in common with other Middle Eastern Jews as opposed to with other Europeans on a higher level. Genetics can tell you that. So what genetics can tell you is very important. As for linguistics, the Hebrew language has been passed on through the centuries. The Mexicans have not been using it. The Haitians have not been using it. The Native Americans have not been using it. That's not who's been using it. The people who have been using it know how it's pronounced, know how it's been passed on. You have a completely butchered, manufactured version of Hebrew that is being used at LQ, right? Completely bogus. You can't even, how can you trust the people who can't even pronounce the language or come near a proper pronunciation of it, can't even recognize a mater lectionis, a mother of reading, a vowel letter, and make it into a consonant? How can you trust them to have other authentic truths? The fact is, there is nothing to connect the peoples of these specific tribes, zero, except some bizarre taking a verse out of context to connect them to anybody on the 12 tribes chart. let me go back to the PowerPoint if I can. Can we put that back up, sir? Just give me a second while, Brother BEREAN, can you get my PowerPoint back up?
Are we able to put the PowerPoint back up? Are we able to put the PowerPoint back up? Okay.
Well, tell you what. Give me just a couple extra seconds because we didn't get that. I'll just go back
I'll pause for 10 seconds. Their time.
All right, we're good. I'll just read these things. I'll just read these things myself then. So Dr. Paul Wexler and some other Tel Aviv University professors were mentioned. Their views have been thoroughly discredited by a wide range of scholars, and that is commonly known. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are actually converts of the Alhazars, which is another theory that comes up. At most, a small amount of them may have converted Khazars, and then they've been lost through history. 2 centuries later, the Spanish Jewish rabbi Chasta Ibn Shaphrut sent emissaries to inquire if the story was true. That's how little lasting evidence there was of this alleged massive Khazar conversion, let alone the Khazar Jews allegedly being the originators of Ashkenazi Jewry. And it should also be pointed out that the Khazar kingdom appears to have been destroyed by 1000 AD with no mention of Jews in that region after that for 400 years. And then linguistically, there is absolutely no linguistic connection between the Khazarian people who spoke a Turkic language, which is what Dr. Paul Wexler was trying to argue, and Ashkenazi Jews whose first language, Yiddish, is very close to German. The Yiddish linguist and onomastic expert, Dr. Alexander Beder, has stated the corpus of personal names and surnames borne by Jews in Eastern Europe during the last 6 centuries, as well as the Yiddish language as a whole, do not contain any link to Khazaria. Check the scholarly literature on it. Dr. Beder has followed, not Dr. Wexler. And as for linguistic refutation, in the Jewish communities of Eastern Europe over the past 6 centuries, not a single Turkic name can be found in documents listing Jewish names. Even in documents from the 15th and 16th centuries dealing with Jews who lived in the territories of modern Ukraine and Belarus, no such names. And there is no connection genetically between Ashkenazi Jewish DNA, and Turkic, Khazarian DNA. So when you dig a little deeper, you hear these bombastic claims being made. Yeah, let's put the PowerPoint down. I'm not actually using that, so thank you. You can remove that.
PowerPoint down, please.
Yeah. I didn't even know it was up. I was just reading from those other slides. So sorry if there was anything confusing there. But in point of fact, this is really simple. You look at the people of Haiti who are allegedly Levi. They don't observe the 7th-day Sabbath. They don't circumcise their sons on the 8th day. They don't teach Torah to Israel. Well, according to the word of God, that is their role. All right. So they are disqualified. When you go through tribe after tribe, if you go around the people of Central America, there's no long-standing oral tradition. They all come from the 12 tribes of Israel. And they are not Middle Eastern. The fact their color's a little darker, they're not Middle Eastern. There's no equivalency there. You know what it's like? Some of the proofs that Alhazar is raising, it's like saying, well, my last name's Brown, so that proves I'm brown. I must be brown skinned. Or I wear a hood, so I must be from the hood. I mean, it's this kinds of ridiculous arguments that are being made. And as for people robbed and plundered, isn't it interesting that how quickly we forget that 2 out of 3 European Jews were slaughtered in the Holocaust? That 3 million out of 3 million Polish Jews were slaughtered in the Holocaust. My people, Ashkenazi. That we have been kicked out of country after country after country. Why are we back in the land? Because God in his mercy promised it, not because of us, but because of his mercy in Ezekiel, the 36th chapter, not because of our works, but because of his mercy. And hate crimes. Are you aware that religious hate crimes in America, the #1 targeted group is Jewish people? And you know what causes a lot of it? The kind of rhetoric that we hear in some of these radical Hebrew Israelite sectors.
A minute
it's
30.
Traced back directly to these very things on social media and beyond. Let me also say, as for Ezekiel, it's very simple. He was to lay on his side 1 day each for the sins and iniquity of Israel, 390 years for Israel. So this is Israel's sin. He lays on his side for 390 days because of Israel's sin in the past, and Judah's sin 40 days. So the 40 years of their sin. Read it, Ezekiel 4. It's not a prophecy about the suffering of African Americans in the United States. It's not related to that anymore. And if you want to find the people on the earth right now, the most robbed, the most plundered, the most attacked, that would be Christians in countries like Nigeria, where they're persecuted by the Muslim majority, or Christians in countries like North Korea where they're slaughtered, you can't just say, well, because this fits, then we throw out the rest of history, we throw out the rest of tradition, we throw out DNA, we throw out genetics, we throw out all of that because a verse seems to apply to somebody somewhere. You can't do that. There's nothing scholastic, academic, truthful, accurate about it whatsoever. I would like to see some actual proof, not all the speculation, but some actual proof. That would be delightful. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. Had about 10 seconds left to spare. If Ahlazar, if at any point during your rebuttal, you need to bring up a PowerPoint, I'll pause it briefly during that time as well, just to FYI. But thank you very much, Dr. Brown, for your first rebuttal. 10 minutes. We appreciate that. I'm going to reset the timer here. And Brother BEREAN, I don't know if you're able to, but if you can, we really need to make this live chat on slow mode. Whoever has access internally to your YouTube platform, you should make it on slow mode. It makes it where you can make limited comments, and so we'll be able to read them because there's so many people here in the live chat. It's very difficult to actually read any comment. And so at the end during the Q&A, we're going to need to ask people to refrain from actually asking question or commenting unless they're asking a question, because there's so many comments coming at you. I'm talking about at the end now. Anyways, we're going to move on now to the first rebuttal, which is the second one here, because Ahlazar has not went yet. You have 10 minutes, and when you begin speaking, I will start the timer and mute my microphone. The floor is yours.
All right. Again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Wow. So where do I start? Personally, as a Haitian, I feel attacked. So he's saying that because Haitians don't teach the law, that means that we can't be the Levites. But he affirmed that the Limbo were Levites based off of DNA. But according to a book called The Black Jews of Africa, History, Religion, and Identity, most Limbo are members of Christian churches, but some who live in Zimbabwe are Muslims. So that means that most Limbo are not teaching the people the laws either. So would that then disqualify them, according to his logic, from being Levites? See, but here's the thing. According to the Bible, the Levites in the last days would not be teaching the law. So let's read this. Ezekiel 44 and starting at 10. And the Levites that are gone away from me when Israel went astray, which went astray from me after their idols, they shall even bear their iniquity. On top of that, admittedly, the majority of Jewry is secular. So that means the majority of people who would be Kohanim do not teach Israel their laws either. Would that then disqualify them? Do we see how problematic and contradictory the logic of Dr. Michael Brown is here? He also said a couple other very interesting things. He said he did not mention Igbo particularly. Well, yes, you did. In a video on your channel called Has the World Gone Crazy 10 years ago. I mean, not 10 years ago, 10 days ago, you affirmed the legitimacy of the Igbo's claim to Israelite descent, right? Moving on. He also said... Yeah, so he also talked about the tradition and as if the tradition validates them. But in his book, the 60 questions, right? 60 questions, I think, to ask, or 60 questions for a Jewish man about Jesus, something to that effect. Forgive me if I'm misquoting the title of his book. But on page 96, he affirms that many Israelites, in fact, lost their identity. So the keeping of the traditions does not validate or invalidate anybody from being an Israelite, right? He also went to... Deuteronomy 28 and 62 and said, because there's so many Black and Hispanic people, that means we can't be Israelites. Well, let's read Hosea 1 and 10. It reads, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. So yes, at a time there might have been a small remnant, but he and I both know that Deuteronomy 28 happens cyclically, and not every single curse applies at every single time and instance. Like every time Israel went under curses, the 68th verse, they didn't always go into slavery on ships to Egypt. Now, did they? Now, he says that in order for us to be Israelites, Deuteronomy 28 and 68 would have to be contradicted. I need him to demonstrate when the Ashkenazi Jews fulfilled Deuteronomy 28 and 68. And if I follow your logic, that means that you guys can't be Jews either now. But how silly is that? Because we all know that at different times, different sectors of those curses are susceptible to befall the Israelites anytime they're backslidden or in iniquity, right? And then also I've not mentioned Khazars at all. So all that Khazar talk, he's just wasting time and beating up a strong man. I have made zero mention of the Khazars whatsoever in my argumentation. I'm actually taking a look at the research done by Ashkenazi Jewish geneticists and linguists, and we're looking at the conclusions that they are coming to. Nothing that he's saying as far as DNA actually disproves anything that I'm forwarding. He's just saying, I mean, the people who are saying we're Jews, we're related, and we have some link back to the Middle East genetically. None of that substantiates somebody as being an Israelite. I'm going to go now back to my presentation, if I could, Vocab. There we go. Okay, perfect.
I briefly pause it.
Thank you.
Until you start speaking again.
All right, I'm ready. Yeah, so let's go into Paul Wechsler, an Ashkenazi Jewish linguist, and let's take a look at and professor of linguistics at Tel Aviv University. Let's take a look at what he had to say, right? Recently, the geographical origins of Ashkenazi Jews and their native language Yiddish were investigated by applying the geographic population structure to a cohort of exclusively Yiddish-speaking and multilingual Ashkenazi Jews. GPS localized most Ashkenazi Jews along major ancient trade routes in northeastern Turkey adjacent to primeval villages with names that resemble the word Ashkenaz. These findings were compatible with the hypothesis of an Irano-Turco-Slavic origin for Ashkenazi Jews and a Slavic origin for Yiddish, and at odds with the Rhineland hypothesis advocating a Levantine origin for Ashkenazi Jews. So the findings of this Ashkenazi Jew and the team that he went into linguistically and genetically studied these people, the Ashkenazi Jews, he came to the conclusion that they actually are not from the Levant or the Middle East and German origins for Yiddish. We discussed genetic structure of Ashkenazi Jews and their geographical origins as inferred from multiple studies, employing both modern and ancient and original ancient DNA analysis. We provide additional validation to the non-Levantine or non-Middle Eastern origin of Ashkenazi Jews using ancient DNA from the Near East and Levant. So they went and got Middle Eastern ancient DNA, and it disqualified the Ashkenazi Jews from that being their place of origin. This is an Ashkenazi Jew himself, again, who is a professor of linguistics at Tel Aviv University, right? And our results reinforce the non-Levantine origin of the Ashkenazi Jews. And again, you can go to this. This is a peer-reviewed article in the Frontiers in Genetics called The Origin of the Ashkenaz, Ashkenazic, and Yiddish. Moving on. More problems with DNA and linguistics. They're alleging their DNA haplogroups and linguistics of a Levantine origin proves they're children of Israel. The problem with that is we say they're Edomites. Edomites' DNA would say they're from the Levant, and their language would match as they spoke Hebrew as well. The same goes for Canaanites, Moabites, Ammonites, and others. So just as they're trying to utilize this to make them validate that they're Israelites, we can easily use the same exact information and say they're Edomites with it, right? Moving on. Not to mention the Ashkenazi Jews come from primarily 4 different haplogroups, J1, J2, E1B1E, and R1A. If they are the legit children of Jacob, why don't they all come from one? Now, again, I don't subscribe to the idea that a DNA haplogroup could trace you back into antiquity. I simply don't. But he does, and he's using it. He's hinging his argumentation upon it, right? There is no one haplogroup amongst them that is a majority. Therefore, if we just went with one of them, just one haplogroup as being Jacob's haplogroup, the majority of them would still be disqualified from being the legitimate children of Israel. What do I mean? There was a test done in 2004 on over 400 Jews. This is the largest test study that I can find. And take a look. So if we just chose one, let's say we said E1B1B was Jacob's haplogroup, right? That means that 84% of Ashkenazi Jews would be disqualified, right? If I chose G2C, 92% of Ashkenazi Jews disqualified. J1 or J2, 81% of Ashkenazi Jews would be disqualified. Q1, 94% of Ashkenazi Jews would be disqualified, right? So on and so forth. So this alleged evidence that he has so much faith in actually totally works against him. Moving on. But let's follow Dr. Brown's logic for a second.
Wash your hands,
right?
Okay.
I'm good. I'm done.
I apologize. 2 minutes and 15 seconds. I was just trying to do it early because you got a little break. I apologize.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. So let's look at the Mexicans, because he said, ain't no way the Mexicans are Issachar. Okay, if we follow Dr. Brown's logic, a significant amount of the Mexican population belongs to the haplogroup Q, which is present in antiquity in the Levant, right? So when Spaniards came, right, they noticed that the tribe of Issachar, I mean, the Mexicans, right, the indigenous Mexicans had obsidian knives that they used for circumcision, which is known as a Jewish rite. So here we see a tradition. We see DNA linking them to the Middle East, and we see a Jewish tradition, right? It also says the Nahua Uto-Aztecan language itself has been shown to have many Hebraic Semitic roots and can be traced to northwest Palestine, where parts of the Israelite tribe of Issachar settled. And this is via Robin Moran, a historian from the University of Manchester and the University of California at Riverside, right? Moving on. This also, he says there's no ancient oral tradition that says that these people are from the tribe of Issachar. The Mexicans originally of the 10 tribes captured by Salmanasar and of the family of Issachar, whom the Indians recognize as their special ancestor. What? Right? So if we follow Dr. Brown's logic, we have genetic and linguistic evidence coupled with tradition that ties Mexican people to the tribe of Issachar. We also have a city in Mexico called Izúcar de Matamoros, in southwestern part of Mexican state of Puebla. Puebla is Spanish for village. So basically this place is called the village of Issachar. So that checks off the tribe of Issachar by all the standards in which Dr. Michael Brown told me to do, and it proves them and it links them directly to him genetically, traditionally, and linguistically. Moving on.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Here we see in Deuteronomy 28:45, Deuteronomy 28:45 to 46, that the curses will be upon the Israelites for a sign forever. This would be a token, a banner, an omen, and we're going to go more into that. Most High will on my next round. All praises to Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. I yield my time with that.
10 seconds. All right, with 10 seconds left. Apologize for that. I jumped in too early. But
You good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, to the live chat. You guys are mainly doing okay. You're mainly doing okay. But let me just encourage you. Only make a comment if you really got something to say. Because there's almost 4,000 people in here, and it's very difficult to read what is going on. I'm just saying, make it count, you know? I'm just saying. And I'm glad there's a lot of people here. Again, thank you to Brother BEREAN for making this happen. Look, if you have not subscribed to Brother BEREAN, let me just take a second in between our first and second rebuttal rounds to tell you to subscribe to him. He's one of the most fair moderators as far as he and his team tries to give everybody an equal voice. And I thought was the best place to do this today. And both debaters agreed. And I'm glad we have places like that on the internet that he has created. So thank you for that. And to the live chat, just continue to operate in the spirit of the debate. Things will get fiery. That's how it is. But there's sort of limits, and just operate within the limits. We'll be all right. I think everyone's doing pretty good so far. Just keep it that way. I appreciate everything thus far. So just a little shout out with that. Okay, now we're going to move into our second rebuttals. We have 20 minutes here. Total 10 minutes each. After this is the cross-examination, and we'll give you like a minute to reset. Okay, I am going to get off here, and the timer starts when you start.
All right. Thanks for that spirited presentation, Ahlazar. Again, it's very easy to debunk these things one at a time. Let's start with the fact that Ahlazar said he didn't say a word about Chazaria, and then he keeps quoting Paul Wexler. What do you think Paul Wexler was talking about? That's what all of Paul Wexler's arguments were about, trying to see if there's any truth to the legend about Ashkenazi Jews coming from Khazar. That's why I refuted it. You didn't even realize what I was refuting was the very thing you were referring to and quoting him about. He has been completely dismantled in his arguments by Dr. Alexander Beder, who is a top onomasticist and a scholar of the Yiddish language as well. He has demolished Dr. Wexler's arguments very, very clearly, as have others. It's an outlying view that's been demolished and rejected. So throughout the whole Khazar thing, the Kalonymous thing, completely misinterpreted that. Throw that out. You still haven't given proof about Ashkenazi Jews who, in fact, have kept the traditions, preserved the language, observed the Sabbath. We're the ones that have observed it. You get some alleged account of somewhere in Mexico that somebody has a stone that's like a circumcision stone. The Mexicans don't circumcise their children on the 8th day. That has not been a long-term custom among them. Where you do find Hispanic Jews that have been hidden, they are now Christians. And it turns out that they converted centuries ago outwardly under pressure from Catholicism when they were in Spain and the Iberian Peninsula. They go back to Sephardic Jews, others that you reject as being real and legitimate Jews. As for Deuteronomy 28:62, Israel in exile means Israel is still under judgment. And if you're telling me that Israel under judgment fulfills Hosea 1 about the massive multiplication of the children of Israel all around the world, then you are contradicting Scripture, and we have to throw it out completely. As for Haiti, you want Haiti to be Levi without teaching Torah and without following the Jewish law, but you also want Haiti to somehow be blessed by God in multiplication at the same time. You can't have it both ways. If Haiti is Levi and Levi is in sin and idolatry, then they are not blessed. And you never answered the question of if the Levites are scattered all over the different tribes of Israel, how they all ended up in one place. Didn't respond to that whatsoever. As for the Igbo, yeah, I said I didn't mention them tonight. I believe I said that I didn't mention them tonight. Yeah, I've referenced them in the past, but you brought them up. Just want to clarify, I didn't mention that tonight. As for Deuteronomy 28:68, it did happen in history. You're correct. My ancestors, and if you're Israelite, I don't know your ancestry, but if you're actually a Jew, then our ancestors were sold into slavery, into Egypt, probably 2,000 years ago, the most recent time, but possibly even 2,700 years ago when we were exiled, the 10 northern tribes exiled from by the Assyrians. The Phoenicians may have sold us into slavery in Egypt as well. There's speculation among historians as far as that's concerned. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not the one bringing up modern history and trying to say that the Ashkenazi Jews were sold back into slavery. This is an argument I'm responding to in terms of going back into Egypt. This is an argument I'm responding to because Hebrew Israelites raise it all the time to say Egypt just means a house of bondage, which it doesn't. It occurs over 680 times. Mitzrayim, Egypt, occurs over 680 times in the Hebrew Bible, and it always refers to a physical place. Therefore, you can read throughout the Torah where it talks about you were slaves in Egypt under Pharaoh. You were slaves in Egypt under Pharaoh, and I delivered you from there. But under judgment, you'll be sold back there. Right? So don't bring that up with the African slave trade. Don't bring that up with modern America. It has nothing to do with it whatsoever. And America is not Egypt. If you try to make it that, you're misusing the word, and therefore by your own criteria disqualify yourself as being a true or legitimate Jew based on your misusing of Scripture. As for the Aztec quote, it's completely bogus. The fellow you mentioned, I actually went to the website. The whole thing is completely bogus. It's based on someone allegedly seeing certain things with the language. There is no connection between Aztec and Northern Israel. Zero. I challenge everyone. Study it out. Look into it. Look at the best linguists on Aztec. All right. And I've been introduced by Ahlazar repeatedly. I'm a top scholar, etc. My PhD is in Near Eastern languages and literatures. I can speak with authority about these kinds of things when it comes to language and linguistic origin. There is zero connection whatsoever. That quote from online is completely bogus. Anyone that looks into it will find it. You just throw something out. Notice when Ahlazar wants to point to something with some scholastic background, says peer-reviewed, etc. Okay, so those we take more seriously, and then the other scholars say, no, that's wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. All right, as happened with Dr. Paul Wexler and some of these others who were denying Ashkenazi Jewries going back to ancient Israel. But these internet sources that are just thrown up for you, utterly, completely bogus. If you get all excited about these things and say, we proved our point, I truly and genuinely and honestly pity you. What I find fascinating is Ahlazar says he's Haitian and he feels attacked by my rejecting the idea that Haitians are Levi. And again, we got zero proof. To this moment, we have zero proof whatsoever for a single person on the chart connecting back to a specific tribe in ancient Israel in any specific way. And if you will look into Mexican DNA, the original Mexican people, you will find there is not any type of strong Middle Eastern connection. Do the research, search it out. You'll find it without fail. But we still have zero proof supplied. And here's what you have to ask yourself. It's been very difficult to be a Jew in history. We've been put out of Christian countries. We've been put out of Muslim countries. You know, Americans know in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Jews know in 1492, all non-baptized Jews were kicked out of Spain. And we had been there at least from the 2nd century of this era on, from archaeological evidence telling us that. That also reminds us that there's a history. You can go back, read histories of the Jewish people, and you don't have gaps of hundreds and thousands of years because these things can be traced back. There was an alleged Hebrew inscription in America. The thing was completely bogus and likely a forgery from the 1930s. But what's really interesting is that one scholar, one professor, Kenneth Felder, an archaeologist, said, you don't just leave an inscription. There's archaeology. There's evidence of people being in a place over the centuries. There's evidence of Jewish people being in places over the centuries. And we have the literature that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. Yes, it's true that the majority of Jews today are fairly secular and not religious, and they will ultimately assimilate over the years. The ones that continue through the generations have been the ones who have been observant and follow the traditions, even when it costs them their lives. And remember, according to Genesis 17, that unless your sons were circumcised on the 8th day, they would be cut off from Israel, cut off from his people. This is what God said, Genesis 17. So if Ahlazar was not circumcised on the 8th day, or his father was not, then they're cut off. They're no longer having Israelite heritage. That's the word. That's the Torah. That's scripture. That's what's written. All right. So it's amazing to me that you have a people who have preserved the Hebrew Bible through the centuries. You have a people who have preserved the Hebrew language through the centuries. You have a people who have continued to live by the laws of Moses. Yes, it's tragic that my people have rejected Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah. That's truly tragic. But you have a people who, with continuity of history, and yes, in sin, in rebellion, scattered, judged, but as God promised, preserved as a people. And then you have all these different groups who are massively unrelated. You talk about genetic disconnection, just go among these different groups and check out the genetic history of Native Americans, for example, and trace these various things out. And again, as I mentioned at the outset, Native Americans here in America before Israel was even formed as a nation. You have history, you have archaeology, you have language tradition, not just some internet myth or some random quote. Look at the people who've been here this whole time. Look at the people who've been here without break. Look at the people who've been kicked out of countries as Jews. Look at the people who've suffered as Jews. Look at the people who've been faithful to circumcise their sons and observe the Sabbath and have not been cut off because of that. Even in exile, God said he would preserve us. Jeremiah 31, verses 35 to 37, make it absolutely clear no matter what we do, God will preserve us and keep us and bring us back. So I mentioned at the outset, bogus Hebrew, that was never refuted. I mentioned bogus connections, never refuted. Even the alleged origin of Azteca going back to Hebrew, completely, utterly bogus. Notice that nothing that I have presented in terms of factual evidence thus far has been refuted or answered. Rather, different information thrown up that can confuse those not familiar. Those who are familiar will see the truth. May the Most High, may God Almighty reveal it to you. Thank you.
Wow. At 1 second. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And it's good we've made it in slow mode. It is in slow mode. I recommend, though, if between you and Alton, if you're able to put it on the extended slow mode where it's even slower than it is, because there's different levels where you can make the gap broader. I think you should do it larger. I'm also still not a mod, but it would be helpful if I was on YouTube. Okay, so that is the the second rebuttal there, 10 minutes. And now Ahlazar, this is the final rebuttal. Are you ready with your final rebuttal? 10 minutes, Ahlazar?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Everyone's done good so far. I appreciate that very much. It'll be interesting to see how this cross-examination goes. I hope we can continue the way things have been going so far. All right. I'm going to stop talking. And when you speak, the floor is yours. And that's when I'll start the timer.
All right. Again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh I do. So in the name of his only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai. So he said I didn't review his bogus Hebrew. The alleged claims of bogus Hebrew, because that's not the topic of this debate. So why then would I entertain that. He also said, I didn't refute the eyes to I never introduced that into the argument. So what's funny is he wants me to argue points that I have not presented. I have not utilized that in my argumentation to prove any of my points. So then why would I address it? Does it need to be addressed? It's not what I'm talking about tonight. Coincidentally, when I asked him to show how the Ashkenazim fulfilled Deuteronomy 28 and 68, he coincidentally gets to go to, oh, well, the ancestors did it. Well, wait a minute. We don't get that same ancestral courtesy that the Ashkenazi get. And that's what's funny. And notice he's just calling things bogus. He's not showing, proving, and demonstrating that things are bogus. And you know what we call that? I'm white and I said so. That's what we call that. I'm white and I said so. Because I'm white, I said it. I have a PhD, so it has to be true. I don't have to demonstrate or prove anything, right? Very coincidental. Now, he said Mexicans and Haitians, we don't circumcise the 8th day. We don't keep the Sabbath. And it's very simple. It's because we're affected by Deuteronomy 28. So let's read Deuteronomy 28 and 64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which thou know their fathers have known, even wood and stone. We've been all forced to worship a white Jesus in Christianity, where they told us we don't need to circumcise ourselves. That's why it's like that, sir. So in understanding that, we fit that. Can you demonstrate where the Ashkenazim have been scattered from one end of the earth to the other, and then are having to serve other gods where they are not allowed to keep that, right? You talked about the Sephardim. What about the Ashkenazim, right? Also, he just read Ezekiel 4. He didn't explain anything about it. I challenged you. Right, as I challenge you on very many other points that you have yet to respond to, so many numerous that I can't even list them now. Ezekiel 4 demonstrate how the Ashkenazim have lived through Ezekiel 4, a 430-year oppression. Right. And then the Paul Wexler thing. Yes, he may have faulty arguments trying to validate you guys being Khazars. I didn't introduce the Khazars, though. I'm talking about the findings of his genetic and linguistic testing that disqualifies or lends credence away from your Levantine origin. I'm talking about the empirical scientific data that was discovered. I'm not talking about his arguments of you being Khazars. So let's make sure that we stay on topic, right? I'm going to pull my PowerPoint back up now, Vocab.
In your time at 7 minutes and 9 seconds, so you can pull up your PowerPoint.
Perfect.
When you begin speaking again, I'll resume it.
All right, all praise, I'm ready. So
okay.
Here's Deuteronomy 28, and again, it will be a sign, right, that will be on. Matter of fact, let me go back. Right, it says it will be a sign, a distinguishing mark, a banner, remembrance, a miraculous sign. So there would be a miraculous distinguishing mark or sign that would be on the Israelites, and it's called the curses, right? So let's just highlight a few of these curses, right? Cursed in rural and urban environments. That's interesting. Kind of like, when the Great Migration was happening back in the day and black people were leaving the oppressive hills of the South and going to the Midwest, to the East Coast, to the West Coast. And guess what happened when they got to the cities? Oh, it was hell there, right? Kind of like that. Or like a lot of us who come from the Caribbean, we trying to escape third world poverty and we come to America and guess what? It's still cursed there, right? Now, also, be by and large unproductive, right? So let's take a look at the productivity that Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian people have versus, let's say, the Ashkenazim. Are they productive people and are we unproductive people by and large? I mean, I'll let the listening audience be their own judge of that, right? And why is that? It's not for lack of ingenuity, lack of creativity, lack of work ethic. We have all those things, but for some reason, we are plagued, we are cursed as people of color in these Americas with being unproductive. Why? Left dead in the streets by dogs. Cops killing us. We killing each other. We're dead in the streets like dogs. Can you show me where the Ashkenazim are dead in the streets like dogs presently? Right? Skip down now. To be oppressed and robbed with no one to deliver. Again, they were delivered. The curses say that nobody was going to deliver. When you guys went through the oppression and the hell of the Holocaust, you were delivered, and not by the Messiah, right? By the armies of the world, by the nations of the world. Not by the Messiah. The curses say nobody would be there to deliver, right? It says another man would benefit more from your labor than you. Have you ever heard of the entertainment industry, the record industry, where the executives thereof are disproportionately Ashkenazi Jews, and a lot of the entertainers, right, whose labors are being profited from far more than they're profiting are Black and Hispanic, right? This is exactly what God said the Israelites would be experiencing, what Black and Hispanic people are experiencing. I need him to demonstrate how the Ashkenazim are experiencing this, right? Moving on, right? It says foreigners will come into your community and quickly surpass you socioeconomically. Who is going into Ashkenazi Jew communities, right, who is not a Jew, and then surpassing them socioeconomically? Oh, nobody. But if we go to our communities, Jews are landlords, business owners, Asians, landlords, business owners, East Indians, landlords, business, Arabs, landlords, business owners, right? In no time. Moving on. It also talks about we'd be forced to serve our oppressors' deities, and things of that nature. I want to move on though. Right, let's go to some of these tribes. I want to get to some of these tribes. Right. So in the book Lost Tribes and Promised Lands, Antonio Mendocinos gives his testimony on his interaction with the Seminole Indians, a part of the larger Muskogee people, right? And they say here that they were from the tribe of Reuben, and the tribe of Joseph was on an island nearby. Of course, the Seminole Indians are there in Florida. Near Florida is what, Cuba and Puerto Rico, right? So there we have the tribes of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Reuben, all summed up in the ancient tradition and heritage there, right? Or in the historical documentation, right? Naphtali were a people that jeoparded their lives unto death in the high places of the field. And these are the type of places in which the Andean civilizations of Chile and Argentina began to develop themselves, in the high places of the field. Again, we've already demonstrated the overlapping curses and prophecies that would be affecting the Israelites clearly fit the description of Black and Hispanic people. So now we go through the more specific things for the tribes to identify the tribes, right? Moving on. So that's Naphtali there. Boom. Gad, Deuteronomy 33:20. And of Gad, he shall be blessed is he that enlargeth Gad, which is why Gad has such a larger land allotment than the other tribes here in the Americas. They have all of, the United States pretty much, and Canada. And it says, he dwelleth as a lion and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. Now that's interesting. So that word for crown of the head there, Strong's H 6936, and it also means scalp. Interestingly enough, tearing of the scalp is a custom found prevalent amongst who? Native American Indians, right? We see this here in the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? So that lets us know about the tribe of Gad. Right, going on to Asher now, Deuteronomy 33:24-25. And of Asher, he said, let Asher be blessed with children. Let him be acceptable to his brethren. Let him dip his foot in oil, and thy shoes shall be iron and brass, and as thy days, so shall thy strength be. The word iron in Strong's H1270 is Brasal. Interestingly enough, sounds a lot like Brazil, in which we would say would be the tribe of Asher, but also
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Thank you. But also oil, right? Large quantities of oil and natural gas are found in several areas within South America. Venezuela also has major deposits of oil and natural gas in the area surrounding El Tigre. The country is one of the world's largest oil producers. See that? Oil? But it also said, hold on, it also said that their shoes shall be iron, and there is unprecedented levels of iron ore and other metals that also are in this land that is allotted to the tribe of Asher according to the chart. Moving on, Zebulun shall be at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven of ships. If you look at the ancient tribal allotment of Zebulun, they, of course, are landlocked. So we see here that the Central America has things like the Panama Canal, other things being developed in Nicaragua, and the most ships in the world are passing through them daily, right?
1 minute.
Tribe of Zebulun, right? 1 minute. Hold on. My fault. Say that. I'm gonna say that for the conclusion. So yeah. So as we can see here, I have presented evidence to support Black and Hispanic people in general being Israelites, and then I went into particular scripture and historical references to give us the particulars on the tribes and some of the surface level reasons as to why we come to these conclusions on which tribe is which. Right. A few more left on the list. So just stay tuned. In my conclusion, I'll complete this through the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. Again, we give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua.
You have 25 seconds left.
That's good. I'll yield that time.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Again, shout out to the debaters. I appreciate the way this has been going down very much. I'm glad this was able to happen. And I think the audience agrees. Everyone seems pretty excited. We got it on slow mode, and it's nothing personal, live audience. It's just when you have 4,000 people watching, you got to slow down how many comments can come in at once so we can actually make sense of what's being said. So craft your comments so they count. Now we're going to move into the cross-examination. The way this works, I need to briefly explain. Each person will have 10 minutes. First, Dr. Brown is able to ask Ahlazar questions. Each one should be 30 seconds, no longer, and the answer no longer than 2 minutes. During this time, if you are being cross-examined, you are not supposed to ask questions. You're not supposed to ask questions of the other person. They do not have to answer any question, and it needs to be on topic. That's the way these things work best, and that really is the rules as well. So with that, Dr. Brown, once you start with your first question to Ahlazar, I am going to start the time. I'm going to stay on the screen for this just because there's so much, it's a bunch of little times, and I'm going to do my best to try to keep it. But you guys have been great so far, so I don't foresee any problems. But go ahead.
When I had mentioned Hebrew errors, I was talking about things that you've actually said, referred to, including tonight. So the Hebrew for bronze or for iron is not brazal. That's incorrect. So there goes your argument. So how do you respond when your Hebrew, or as teka, that you said previously in a 3-hour lecture, relating back to Hebrew, that's 100% false. So how do you explain these very, very bogus errors if we're supposed to take your words seriously?
Well, number one, I didn't present Eyes to Ka at all tonight. So I don't believe that it's fair that I be held to scrutiny on things that I may not necessarily stand on. If I didn't introduce that argumentation, sir, I don't believe it's fair that you even question me on it.
Okay, just for clarity, you brought in arguments that I've made. So how is it okay that you brought in arguments I didn't make tonight, but I can't bring arguments that you've made if you didn't make them tonight?
Do you think it's unfair that I did that?
I have no problem with it, but you're not letting me do the same with you.
That's my own personal position to do that.
Okay, fine. So you're completely wrong about the Hebrew word for iron.
Okay.
All right, so we throw that out. All right, let's go over to Gad.
I can't ask you a question, but you're just saying that.
Well, the Hebrew is Barzel. The Hebrew is Barzel. Anyone who knows Hebrew knows it's Barzel. It's not Brazal. It's Barzel.
Okay, so let's say I mispronounced it. I didn't pronounce it right. My point still stands as I'm just pointing out the eerie similarity that word has to Brazil, in which we say is of the tribal allotment of Asher. That was my point. Oops, I mispronounced it according to you.
No, you didn't mispronounce it. It's a made up word. That's number one. But
okay, I don't want to ask. I can't ask a question, but just for the audience now, Brazal and Brazil. I mean,
Barzel versus Brazal are two different words. The one made up, the second real. But it also says Barzel and Nechoshet. Okay, it mentions iron and it mentions bronze. Where's Nechoshet? Please show me. If you're going to pull out one, you can't just pull something out of a verse and say that's Brazil because it sounds like it. Look, show me where Nechoshet is.
I didn't make the definitive statement that was Brazil. As I just said, I just simply pointed out the eerie similarity. That's all I did.
Okay. Well, there's no eerie similarity when you just pull one verse out. But anyway, about Gad, you just cited that it could well speak about the Native Americans who scalped people, but the Hebrew says it says that he will taraf zroa af kadkod, so that he will rip off the arm and the forehead. So where was the Native American tradition of ripping off the arm?
I don't know of one.
Okay, thank you. So we disqualify that one there.
I disagree.
Well, let the audience decide. Okay,
of course.
All right, and you are aware of other people like the Scythians, etc., in antiquity who scalp victims. Maybe they could be the people.
Well, that would be true if I was only basing it upon that.
Oh, okay, fine. let others decide if you have any actual proof for the connection there. All right, so explain to me how, if Haiti is Levite and the Levites were mingled and scattered among all the tribes and then exiled with all the different tribes all around the world, how they end up all in one place off the coast of America?
Well, Dr. Michael Brown, if you actually were familiar with people of the Caribbean, you would understand that the Haitian diaspora is one of the biggest diasporas in the world, and that there are predominant large groups of Haitians in the diaspora and amongst all other Black and Hispanic people in the Americas, especially. I'm going to be presenting that here in my next round.
No, I'm quite aware of that. And there are actually Jews scattered among all those peoples as well. But how did they all end up in one place, or so many in one place? That's never happened in Israelite history. How did it happen here?
It's never happened in Israelite history. So how about when we take a look in the Bible, when the kingdom split and all the Levites who were in the northern kingdom then resorted to Rehoboam? That means there would be an influx of Levites in one particular place in Jerusalem or in the southern kingdom.
All right, so then they would have ended up among the Judeans. And
yes, and
Judeans, you said, were African Americans.
So that, just to be clear, so that means what? There would have been an excess of them coming from one place into another place.
Okay, but didn't explain how they got separated and reunited. Okay, so
yes,
according to Genesis 17, God says that if you don't circumcise your son on the 8th day, you will be cut off from the people. So you're no longer an Israelite. So many of the people, almost everybody in the chart has no tradition of circumcising their sons on the 8th day through the centuries. So then they're all cut off. They can't be Israel.
I disagree.
Well, the floor is yours. Explain.
I disagree. That's all I'll say. I disagree.
All right. I would say you're disagreeing with the word there. All right. So
I would say you disagree with the word several times in this debate, and I think that's been demonstrated very well.
Another question. If the facts are on your side, why couldn't you avoid for one simple night race baiting? Why did you have to make this about race and now try to appeal to emotion to just get people to not listen to me because I'm white? Why couldn't you just stay with facts, evidence? To me and to many others, it seemed like a concession that you knew you were sinking and you had to just rely on something to appeal to people's emotions. Why couldn't this avoid race? I've avoided all personal insult and told people to give you a listen, to give you a hearing. Why couldn't you avoid race in terms of the personal attack?
When you're a part of a group of people who have suffered like the true children of God, maybe then you'd understand.
I have been a part of people that suffered like the true children of God. But if that's an excuse for race baiting, okay. So explain this just so I can understand your own thinking here, sir. You keep referring to yourself as a priest, high priest. We know
I never said high priest. I never said high priest.
My apologies, sir. Priest. Okay. So chief priest, have you referred to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, chief priest and high priest were similar, but in any case,
no.
I apologize for misrepresenting.
Cohen Godel and Cohen Resh is different, no?
Okay, fine. But the chief priest was the high priest. Either way, but that's fine. You don't refer to yourself as high priest. All clear. So we know that priesthood came through the father paternally. We understand that. But we also understand that according to Ezra 9, that if a priest married a foreign woman, that the foreign woman and the children were to be put away because they were disqualified. So we know your mother was white. You've been open about that. So just in your own thinking, and according to scripture, doesn't that disqualify you from being a priest?
Well, no, all we have to do is actually take a look at that situation. So we could go nowhere in the Torah and actually demonstrate that precedent. Even when we take a look at the priests of Moses' sons, right? We know Moses' sons had a foreign mother. We clearly see in 1 Chronicles 23 that Moses' sons are named for the tribe of Levi. So they were never disqualified, and they were also the priests who were set over the treasury in the temple. So that never disqualifies them. Additionally, though, we see a situation in Ezra where Ezra makes a judgment call predicated upon what was going on at that time, right? What was going on at that time was there was a bunch of Israelites who were taking foreign wives, who are allowing those foreign wives to dictate the spiritual system in which those children and the culture and customs that those children were being raised in. So Ezra at that time took matters upon himself and did something to clean the Levites and the priests at that time. But we cannot go to the Torah and see that as the mandated word of God, that's how that situation needs to be handled.
Okay.
About 2 minutes. So we have about 2 minutes left.
Got it. Got it. All right. So you brought in Edom and claimed that I have descent from Edom somehow, but then that would give me Middle East descent. And then you used others arguing that there is no Middle East descent for Ashkenazi Jews. So which one do you hold to? Middle East descent or not?
It's not about whether I hold to Middle East descent. So just to be clear, Dr. Michael Brown, I do not agree with the DNA argumentation whatsoever. So I was bringing different studies that were done by different Ashkenazi Jews that disqualified or contradicted the DNA evidence that you were attempting to bring in. That's all I was doing. That doesn't mean I hold to any of those things. I'm using it to disqualify the DNA argumentation entirely.
Okay. All clear in terms of your methodology. So folks, you'll have to decide whether you listen to geneticists or not. But that's fair enough in terms of what you were doing there. So you do believe that Edom was white, but we know, of course, that he's referred to as Admoni, which is red, which is exactly how David is described, Admoni. And that's also how Solomon in the Song of Solomon is described as Admoni. So wouldn't that make David and Solomon white as well?
No, sir. So, of course, when we take a look at the color spectrum, we know that red has various different shades, over 50 shades of the color red. So we would have to look at the context of each one of those scriptures to determine which shade of the red that was being referred to. And I believe the red like a carried garment gives us an idea when we take a look at antiquity. Of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the Kermes dye, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that was taken off the trees of the Mediterranean from the blood of worms and utilized to dye garments. That's blood red. So that's why, because of the context clue that is in that verse, we come to the conclusion that Edom was Caucasian or Esau was a Caucasian versus what we see the description of other people throughout the scripture.
Are you aware that the text does not say that he was red like a garment, but that he was red and hairy like a garment, that the garment is referring to the hair, not to the color? Are you aware that that's how the Hebrew text reads?
I would disagree.
Fair enough. So when you keep referring to me as a scholar and then dismiss everything I say and then appeal to the race card, where is the respect for the scholarship?
I respect all people to a degree. Right, but that doesn't make you 1,000% right simply because you have a piece of paper, sir.
I didn't say 1,000% right. That wasn't the issue. Thank you. Okay, my time's up.
Yes, final question. We always let the last question play out and finish. Okay, we're going to reset now. Thank you for that, everyone, very much. For the most part, we did just what we're supposed to do, and I appreciate everyone involved. We have 10 minutes now for cross-examination, and it's going to be Ahlazar's turn to ask Dr. Brown questions. Just give me a second to reset my timer first, please. I'm going to make sure I got that, and then you can go. Okay, I have it now, so when you speak, I will start the timer.
All right, Dr. Brown, you affirm that the Jews are under curses, right? Can you demonstrate the curses of Deuteronomy 28 that are presently affecting the Ashkenazi Jews?
Sure. Right now, to this day, we are the subject of hate crimes on a higher level, religious hate crimes than anyone else in America. Very sadly, many times at the hands of African Americans, the levels of anti-Semitism worldwide are as high as they were before the Holocaust. Jews have had to leave France. Jews have had to leave Russia. These are Ashkenazi Jews, and for the most part, they've had to leave England. Right now, within Israel, Israel is surrounded by hostile enemies 24/7, and there's constant attack. So we've suffered these things. Now, you and I would agree that the curses don't have to apply to every single person at every single time. You quoted Hosea 1, for example, about all the blessing that's being experienced. And you've elsewhere referred to, say, Judah, everyone will praise Judah, so look at how everyone looks to African Americans, etc. But by and large, if you want to look at a people who has suffered over the centuries around the world, watch Fiddler on the Roof. That's been life for Ashkenazi Jews for centuries, persecuted, hated, impoverished. So yes, there are good things that happen in our midst, just like good things in African American, Hispanic midst. But yeah, we've suffered terribly and continue to.
Okay, so I don't know if you understand my question, Dr. Brown. I said you affirm Jews are under the curses. Can you demonstrate the curses of Deuteronomy 28 that are presently affecting the Ashkenazi Jews? That does not mean bad things happening to them. I need to know the verse that corresponds to what you're describing in Deuteronomy 28.
Sure. Let me pull up the text and we'll start going through verse after verse. And by the way, again, you said that some of these happened historically Absolutely agree. Much of it has happened historically. For example, being sold in slavery back to Egypt, that happened historically. I'm not the one who brought up the contemporary argument about that. That's been brought up to say, well, that it refers to African Americans sold into American slavery. So obviously you reject that. So let's just go back. It doesn't have to be to this moment. Let's go back to what happened in the Holocaust, recent history. Cursed shall you be in the city, cursed shall you be in the country. Wherever you were as a Jew, you were persecuted as a Jew. Cursed shall be your basket, your kneading bowl. Jews were put under starvation diets in the concentration camps and in the ghettos. Hundreds of ghettos where they were deprived. Cursed shall be the issue of the room, the produce of your soul, the calving of your herd, the lambing of your flock. Jewish babies were thrown into the fire alive just because they were Jews. Cursed shall be your comings, cursed shall be your goings. This was the circumstance for a period of intense years. The pogroms in Russia, where Jewish communities were decimated, the Lord will let loose against you calamity, panic, frustration, all the enterprises you undertake. All these things and more happened in horrific level in the Holocaust. That's far more recent than the slave trade. The fact is,
Dr. Brown, I asked you very, very explicitly, presently, like you mentioned starving in the ghetto, like blacks and Hispanics are starving in the ghetto as we speak. So I asked you very specifically, presently, can you demonstrate what curses of Deuteronomy 28, the Ashkenazi Jews presently are under? Because you said the Jews are presently under curses. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me come back to this. Barack Obama was president of the United States. There are Black Americans who are leading citizens in our country.
Dr. Brown,
can I please speak?
He's Kenyan. He's Kenyan. He's not a descendant of slaves, just for the record.
Okay, so there are plenty of prominent African Americans that would go back, according to you, to Judah.
This doesn't answer my question.
Let me speak. You are not all presently under a curse. So I pointed to Jews in France right now who are persecuted, who are hated, who are being killed. Jews in England, rising tide of anti-Semitism. They're being harassed. They're being beaten. They're being attacked. It's been a history in Russia. So these things are currently happening. But again, you said during the debate that this does not have to be for all people present today. You want to have it both ways. You want to talk about all the accomplishments, how many good things are happening. Mexicans in Mexico right now are not suffering all these curses. And I go, Central Americans in Central America are not suffering all these curses. So you've got to be consistent in your application.
Dr. Brown, for the record, I just asked you to identify a curse that is presently affecting the Ashkenazi Jews. I didn't say all of them had to. Notice that you didn't demonstrate any. So now I move on. You affirm that there are both Black and Hispanic Jews. Can you demonstrate the curses of Deuteronomy 28 that the Black and Hispanic Jews are currently affected by?
Hispanic Jews currently under these types of curses, not aware in particular at the moment, or Black Jews specifically under these curses. For example, the Lord will make pestilence cling to you until he has put an end to you in the land that you are entering to possess. The Lord will strike you with consumption, fever, and inflammation, with scorching heat and drought, with blight and mildew. They shall have. That's not happening to Hispanic Jews or Black Jews or the people on the chart specifically. These are things that have happened in history. That's the whole point. They've happened in history. And if, in fact, the people on the chart, it's accurate what you're saying, then they're not scant, they're not few. They have grown and grown and grown, which would be a sign of the blessing, which would mean that we're all back in the land if we were blessed. So all these Israelites should be back in the land now, if what you're saying is true, because you're experiencing this massive blessing of hundreds of millions of people. Again, it's the massive inconsistency. You want to take a verse from here, turn it around, a verse from there, turn it around, and then hold me to a completely different standard. All I'm asking is you to be consistent.
Consistency. Funny you say that. Yesterday on your show, you said there will be no future exiles for Israel, but in your commentary on both Jeremiah 23 and Jeremiah 30, you refer to a collective deliverance from oppression for both kingdoms by the Messiah in the last days to bring them back home. How can that be true and the Ashkenazim be Israelites?
Well, very simple. We're not all back in the land. I absolutely said there's not going to be a future exile from the land, all the Jews kicked out. I hold to that. Nothing I said in my commentary. I wrote the commentary. Thank you for reading it. I'm quite familiar with what I said. When the Messiah returns, there will still be exiles in different parts of the world. Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardi Jews, Lemba Jews, and it could be you. I don't know your background or history. that may still not be back in the land. So those that are still outside the land will be brought back. I'm really surprised by the question, actually.
Okay. Maybe I misunderstood you. Now, are Edomites from the Levant?
Sure.
Were Edomites converted to Judaism?
There was a small group there. There was, Herod was one of them. There were some Edomites who were forcibly converted. Yeah.
Right. So would that mean that that there could be a portion of Edomites that would have DNA, linguistic, and traditional evidence that could link them to being Jews, similar to you guys?
No, linguistically, no, because Edomite would have been a different dialect, like Moabite was a different dialect, etc. So it was a different Semitic dialect than Hebrew. That's number one. Number two, the Edomites that became part of the Jewish people, this was before the time of Jesus. So if you have legitimate Israelite blood, that could go back to you. All right. So but you've got this little trickle that came in. There is zero way to connect me back to Edom other than rhetoric and race baiting and things like that, or even to make him into a white man, to be candid. Zero whatsoever. So
there's zero way to connect you back to Edom, who lived just south of Israel, and then who a portion of them converted into Judaism and at least spoke a Semitic dialect.
Any more than to connect Edom to you. Maybe there's the connection there to you. Perhaps you're an Edomite.
What tribes are the Black and Hispanic Jews from?
We don't know. It's virtually impossible to trace tribal lineage. There's some that have claimed that there's a way to trace back some Judeans to a Davidic root. The most certain thing we can do is with priestly peoples. So Ashkenazi and Sephardi and Mizrahi and Lemba priests do have a common ancestry that goes back about 3,000 years, apparently to Aaron in the Middle East. But there's no way to trace the other tribes. There are some Jews, for example, Mizrahi Jews who've lived continuously in Iraq or Iran until 1948 that could trace things back pretty well, and they may have some family traditions, etc. But there's no way, there's no genetic way to put anyone in any particular tribe. That's one of the fundamental massive differences that I have with your chart, sir.
Okay. So when did the 430-year judgment of Ezekiel 4 happen to the Ashkenazi Jews?
Yeah, so it looks like the last question here. I'll try to get my answer in. You're misreading it. It's saying that there are 430 days that Ezekiel is to lay on aside because of the 430 years of sin of the northern kingdom. So for every year of sin of the northern kingdom leading up to that time, he is to lay on one side. And then for the sin of Judah, for those years leading up to that, those immediate years leading up to it of such terrible sin, he's to lay on his other side. It's not a prophecy about future judgment coming. Rather, he is commemorating the past years, the past centuries of sin of his people, and he's laying on one side or the other because of that.
Do we have that? Was the last question.
You have 5 seconds left.
I'm good. I'm good. And that's fine.
Okay, excellent. Let me see here. Boom, 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 boom. All right, thank you guys very much. Appreciate that. And shout out to the live chat. Shout out to the mods. Everyone's doing well, holding it down. And this will be interesting. It's like after a major game, all the commentary, it'll last. This is going to last for a while. It'll be fascinating. And Gorilla and myself are working, maybe me and someone's car, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, working on some kind of follow-up to this debate. So stay posted for that. We will see. And I know Brother BEREAN is going to be doing stuff. And, of course, on Dr. Brown's show as well. We're going to give you socials for that at the end. Okay. So now we're going to move to the closing statements. So take together, audience, everything you've heard so far, and these two gentlemen are going to wrap it up. They do not have much time. They only have 5 minutes to make these closing statements. So they're going to each make a closing statement. Dr. Brown's going to go first. Alhazar is going to go second. 5 minutes now for the closing statements. Dr. Brown, the floor is yours. Once you start, I'll start the time.
So, again, thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and BEREAN TV, Vocab, for everything. And Alhazar, thanks for being a gentleman in the back and forth here. I appreciate it. And I encourage you to step higher. People will take your arguments more seriously if you don't race bait, if you don't have to press these emotional buttons, because when the truth is on your side, you just don't have to do this. And I'm not going to introduce new information here in keeping with the proper format for closing statements. A couple things to say. I pointed out blatant Hebrew errors thus far, and the fact that the so-called Lashon Kodesh is a complete myth. It has never existed before. It is a made-up myth. And if you can't trust people just to get the Hebrew right, how in the world are you going to trust them for everything else? Also, notice that Ahlazar is pulling quotes from the very same video. He's using them tonight. And when I went back to that video, he said, well, I don't know that I necessarily hold to those things. So perhaps as we keep correcting the Hebrew and correcting these other things, his views will moderate more and more in the days ahead. And notice that not one bit of factual, genetic, literary, historical, archaeological proof that connects any of the groups to these specific 12 tribes has been offered. And in fact, you can't connect people to the specific 12 tribes, except for maybe some priestly ones and a scattered few. You simply cannot do it. So here's my larger appeal. I know emotions are high, and I know people came in with preconceived ideas already. And I asked you at the start, take them seriously. Now, here's what concerns me. February 2022, Ahlazar is speaking after the Super Bowl or at that Sunday and said, that's how this movie ends, man. All right, that's the future of this world. Black and Latino people ruling the world. Jesus Christ is a big, angry black man, a black man who the whites of his eyes are red, and he's ready to come and kill. He wants to stomp people's brains out of their cranium. He wants to step on you people's head until your brains come out. Remember when 50 Cent said his brain come out the top like Jack in the Box? Remember? That's one of my favorite lines, right? That's what Christ is coming back to do. And on a regular basis, we get comments like this. Here's from the tribe of Levi just a day ago. Hitler is an enemy and heathen devil like yourself, Dr. Brown. The Holocaust never happened, so stop lying to the world. This is the junk that has to stop. It's one thing if you say I'm not a legitimate Jew. Of course I am, but that's secondary to me, to being in Jesus, Yeshua. He's the one who forgave my sins. He's the one who cleansed me when I was a heroin shooting, LSD using hippie rock drummer at the age of 16. He's the one I love, whether I'm Jew, Gentile, black, white, slave free. He's my savior. He's my all in all. And he's the one that you need to know. When he comes back, he's not going to be judging based on race. When he comes back, he's going to be judging based on whether we're in right relationship with him or not. And the fruit that I want to produce is a fruit that generates love, not hate. It's a fruit that generates unity, not division. Just sit down together and say, hey, where there are African American Jews and Hispanic Jews, here I'm a Jew that's cast out by my own people because I'm a follower of Jesus. Well, let's work together to get the larger Jewish community to recognize that we are legitimate Jews. And if they don't know it, God knows it. But all this stuff that produces hate, that produces unnecessary racial division, man, if there are injustices, Ahlazar, against your people, against Latino people, whatever I can do to be a champion for justice, stand with you, I'm here to do it because I'm not here to make enemies. I'm here to be an ambassador of reconciliation and to say, let's get right with God through Jesus. And if you look at the comments that'll come pouring in, look to see where the hate's coming from. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot produce good fruit. Look at the fruit of the rhetoric. Look at the violence. When you see the violence against Jews in America, sadly, at the hands sometimes and most frequently of African Americans, especially in New York, and they're tracing it back to social media rhetoric, let's all step higher. And if you can show me where I'm doing anything to cause you pain, or I'm doing anything to hurt you, or I'm doing anything to work against you, your well-being, show me, and by God's grace, I will fix it because I want to stand for justice and truth. So, to repeat, there has been zero proof given whatsoever that the 12 tribe chart is factual, accurate, historical. The few references that were made, scripture, Hebrew, were wrong and easily refuted. And there was no actual proof given that Ashkenazi Jews are not legitimate Jews. Even the evidence that was cited was misunderstood and misrepresented. So I know Ahlazar took this seriously. I know he's prepared. In no way do I mean to insult you on a personal level, sir. I would not have done this debate unless I knew you'd be prepared and ready. But I encourage everyone, seek the truth and follow it wherever it leads. May God give you the courage to do it.
All right. Perfect timing. There we go. Thank you very much. We are on to the final closing statement by Ahlazar. Listen, audience, get your questions ready. You're going to have to make your question fit in one post. If you do it in two, we're not going to be able to see it. I'm just telling people now so they're getting set up for it. The way you do it is at BEREAN TV. You're going to have to put his name in there and then capital Q with a question mark at the end. And that's the only way it's going to work. And so all the BEREAN, I don't know if there's anyone else who's able to put the questions on the screen. When we go, you'll need to put them on the screen first for Dr. Brown, then for Ahlazar. Now, we're not doing that yet. I'm just trying to get it set up because it's going to be a little tricky part of the debate. Ahlazar, you have 5 minutes for your closing statement to end this portion of the debate. The floor is yours.
All right, again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh. I do so in the name of His only begotten Son, who the world calls Christ. Yahweh, if anybody is appalled or, has any objections to the quote of mine that Dr. Michael Brown quoted, all they simply have to do is go read Isaiah, the 63rd chapter, and that's where it comes from. Also, he asked me about Genesis 17 and you lose your Israelite heritage if you're not circumcised. But all we have to do is refer to Joshua 5 to substantiate why I disagree with that. He also said, I brought no proof. And we've all been sitting here tonight. We all know that that is untrue. I have certainly brought proof, but I want to point everybody to something here. Right here on my, if we could do my PowerPoint. I want to point everybody here, right? Because he apparently doesn't accept the proof that we've brought tonight. But here are the Beni Manasseh, right? The Beni Manasseh have been accepted into Israel as the tribe of Manasseh, right? And the movement began in 1951 when a tribal leader reported having a dream that his people's ancient homeland was Israel, with others then embracing the idea that they were Jews. All it took was one guy having a dream in 1951 for this group of Tibetan people to be accepted as the tribe of Manasseh by the Israelis. That's all it took. So if I presented light evidence for who we believe is the tribes, I mean, how much lighter is just some guy had a dream 60-something years ago? Right? But this is why, and that you can call it an appeal, you can call it whatever you want, but this is where the race baiting comes from. When we are undermined, right? When our argumentation is discredited because it's not valid, but then you let the Tibetans just have a dream like Martin Luther King and now they're Jews. Now they're the Manassites. That's ridiculous. At least we have some form of scriptural biblical interpretation and historical reference that's making us come to these conclusions. Not just simply one guy had a dream and that's it. Right? Moving on. Let's read this. Leviticus 26, 32 to 33, right? Yes, I myself will devastate your land, and your enemies who come to occupy it will be appalled. That's key. But at last, my people will confess their sins and the sins of their ancestors for betraying me and being hostile towards me. Right. So here we see that the Israelites go and sin, and enemies come and occupy their land. Right. Then it says, after we confess our sins, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham, and I will remember the land. So the Israelites were to be exiled. Enemies were to occupy our land until we repent. Then we would be brought back to the land. That's what this is demonstrating here in Leviticus 26. You know what the problem is? Those people, his people, are not in repentance. So why are they back in the land? You know what that makes them? Not the Israelites, but rather the enemies who are presently occupying the land.
2 minutes.
Right? It makes them, Revelations 2 and 9. It makes them those who say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. It makes them the synagogue of Satan. That's what it makes them, right? Now look at this. Luke 21 and 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. When does the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled? It's very simple. When the kingdom of Christ is established on earth. So we're presently living in the time of the Gentiles. So whoever is over there in Jerusalem are the Gentiles that are trotting it down. That's what that makes him and his people. Now, in closing, right now, I know I'm not saying anything. He says there was no black Jews in antiquity, but I'm looking at the archaeological depiction of some Israelites here, and I'm looking at Randy Moss, man, and I'm just saying, man, I'm just saying that resemblance is damn near uncanny, right? But with that, I want to bring close to my presentation. Again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, Yahweh, and I do so in the name of his only begotten son, the King, the Messiah. Yahweh Shai, I'd like to thank Dr. Michael Brown for taking the time for this debate, as I feel like it was very important. I'd like to thank Brother BEREAN for hosting this debate. I'd like to thank Vocab Malone for all of the legwork he did putting this debate together. I'd like to thank, of course, again, the Most High and the nation of Israel, so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native Indians. I hope it's even more clear, it's even more abundantly clear that we are the legitimate children of Israel. And I'd like to thank the nation. I know y'all were behind me. I'd like to thank everybody for their prayers, my family, my camp, everybody out there. Again, Yahweh Bashem Yahushua Barakathum, and again, all praises to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. Shalom.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much. Perfect timing. All right, everyone. I know you're, in the audience, but to the audience, definitely give it up to both of the debaters. They deserve their flowers, their respect, their kudos. Okay, now we're switching into the final portion of tonight's program. Brother BEREAN, we're gonna have to communicate. So I see your mic is closed. Do you have some questions you're able to put on the screen? And the way it's going to work is, please leave the question on the screen as it's the one being answered. And I think it makes sense, since we're doing a certain order, to start with asking a question to Dr. Brown first. BEREAN, are you or someone else able to, since you're the one on the StreamYard, I think you're only the one able to do it there.
Yeah, I'm looking right now.
Okay. So to the live chat, at BEREAN TV, and then the best way to do it is if you hit that capital Q and then a question mark at the end. I see a number. What you may have to do, BEREAN, is where you essentially pause the live chat, where you kind of stop it with the cursor to get one, because it's moving so fast. Alton, I don't know if you're maybe able to slow down slow this down just a little bit more to where it's 2 minutes per comment. And so I see one person like Deacon, he's got a super chat, and in my opinion, those should be prioritized too, but they still got to go in order. We still got to alternate. You know what I'm saying? They still got to do it that way. So Brown first, BEREAN first. So I'm just waiting on, Brown first, then Ahlazar first as far as the question. BEREAN, I'm just waiting on you. I'm just kind of stalling. You got to put the question on the screen so I can read it. Because if I just grab one from the live chat, is that what you want me to do? Do you want me to just grab one from the live chat? Because I was trying to get it on the screen, but that'd be you, not me.
Yeah, go ahead, grab it. I'll try to see if I can catch it and pull it up.
Okay, well, if we do that, it won't be. You understand? It won't be on the screen there. Okay. That's going to take me a second as well. Okay. Here we go. Flex the Hebrew. I'm grabbing the first one I see that is for Dr. Brown at BEREAN TV. And you did the format right. So thank you for that. Dr. Brown, please break down Jeremiah 17:4. Can you please break down Jeremiah 17:4? That is the question that they want you to answer. And you got 2 minutes, and then Ahlazar will have 1 minute if he decides to respond.
Sure. So it's Jeremiah, of course, prophesying against his own people, Judah. You'll forfeit by your own act the inheritance I've given you. I'll make you a slave to your enemies in the land you've never known, for you've kindled the flame of my wrath, which shall burn for all time. Right. So this refers to the exile of the people of Judah into Babylon, kicked out of the promised land. It had previously happened to the 10 northern tribes, but this is speaking of the exile that would come and the pain that would come upon the peoples. It's throughout the whole book of Jeremiah. We could have picked, dozens and dozens and dozens of verses that say the same thing. So the promised land was their inheritance. They became slaves to their enemies in different nations. And sadly, that happened then. And where it speaks of the wrath being kindled for all time, the Hebrew term for all time it can mean for successive generations and things like that. But yeah, it was terrible judgment that came. By the way, just for the record, what you were just told about B'nai Manasseh, totally inaccurate. Just get online and search for that. And as for how could it be under judgment that the Jewish people come back without repentance? It says in Ezekiel 36 that even though you're still in sin, because of my name being blasphemed, I'm going to bring you back to the land. That's how you can tell the real Jews are, because God brought us back to the land in his mercy.
That's a misrepresentation of Ezekiel 36, but I don't understand why we're still responding to what went on and around in the the audience Q&A. I think that's very inappropriate and against the rules.
You brought in new information in the closing statement, which is against the rules. So I was just responding.
Where in the rules where it was emailed to me, it said I couldn't bring in new information?
Hold on. Okay. That
I'm sorry. I took it for granted as debating etiquette because whoever goes last, if you bring in brand new information, no one gets to respond to it. So it's common debating etiquette that anyone would know having done it. But fair enough. If you did it innocently, I don't hold it against you.
Okay, so that was the first question, and that was to Dr. Brown. I need some questions for Ahlazar. I need some questions because he is next. We're alternating with this. Okay, here's one. John Evan for Christ. 2 Guerrilla Hebrew. Here's the first question for him. Unless Ahlazar, sorry, unless you wanted to respond to anything he said just now, you have 1 minute. Unless you want to just go on and move on.
No, good. We can move on.
Okay. I forgot to do that part because it's a little. Anyways, Donovan for Christ. 2 Guerrilla Hebrew. If Jesus' earthly father is Joseph, then how come Matthew and Luke's genealogy are different? And Jeconiah and Matthew's genealogy is disqualified in Jeremiah 22:30. Okay, this is why I was hoping, BEREAN, you can help me with these questions because it's
really off topic.
This has nothing to do with it. So I grabbed the first one I saw for him, but that's totally off topic. So yeah. I need here. Let's see if this one is okay. Here,
whoever that is, just come by my channel when we're live, and you can ask that question. We could deal with that, but of course, that's totally not what we're talking about.
So my bad. I shouldn't even. It's just I'm trying to find. Okay, I got one now. No, we're still on Ahlazar, though. You're putting the questions on the screen for Dr. Brown. We need to do Ahlazar. It's alternating here. Okay, from Ian Campbell. I think this is relevant. I believe this is relevant. Ian Campbell, this is to you, Ahlazar. What does bloodline matter when the Bible says it's about faith? Galatians 3:6-9. From Ian Campbell. What does bloodline matter when it says about faith? Galatians 3:6-9.
Well, I think that Dr. Brown and I would both agree that the covenant people of God will always matter, right? That's why God entered into covenant with Israel. People who espouse, Christianity may defer on, of course, the grafting in and, things of that nature, but there's no disqualification of the importance of the covenant people of God, or else God would have never entered into covenant with them to begin with.
Okay. Dr. Brown, do you want to say anything with that?
Yeah, just to say this. Of course, there's importance in recognizing Jewish heritage, Israelite heritage, etc., and the overall purposes of God. My point was ultimately we are united, Jew, Gentile, Black, White, Asian, Hispanic, in Jesus, Yeshua. And what matters is being in right relationship with God through Yeshua, because you could die a Jew and be lost if you've rejected Yeshua. You could be a Gentile and die in right relationship with God through Yeshua.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a question here from Rapa Israel Shalom. Dr. Brown, you're putting deacons on the screen? Okay, so Dr. Brown is next. We'll do that because you got one on the screen now. I'll just read the one that is on the screen. Thank you. Is there any proof the Kalanimus family originates from Israel?
The Kalanimus family is a particular argument that I didn't raise myself tonight. But yeah, as far as best as we can tell, the evidence would trace them back to Jewish communities in Europe, which then in turn are traced back further to the 1st century. The most recent major DNA study that was done, published November of 2022, is quite a massive study, so that we can clearly see the Ashkenazi descent goes back to Jewish communities in Rome in the 1st century, where they were somewhere a community there, but Josephus speaks of as many as 96,000 that were sent into Rome, many of them as slaves by the Romans after the destruction of the temple. And then from there, Jewish Gentile women and others marrying in, and then the descent continuing from there, and then ultimately making it in the Rhineland in Germany. But the Kalanimus family, that's just speculation about one particular family that could have been a prominent family. But yeah, they would be traced back, not to converts, but traced back to those Jews who were in Italy. But the Kalanimus thing, that was just one argument that was raised.
1 minute if you want to say something in response, Gorilla. Ahlazar?
No, I don't have any response to that.
Okay. But by the way, the other person is not required to respond. That's an option they have. I just want to make sure the live chat knows that. Okay. Here's one. Definitely want to get to this one. $20 super chat. Yeshub, does Guerrilla Hebrew understand? Wait, you have one on there? So, BEREAN, to me, you should read your big super chats first. Is that a super chat as well?
all of this stuff is moving fast.
Let me go to the super chats, because when someone pays $20,
please do. Go ahead. Please do.
Through. That's all I'm saying. So I'm trying to focus on the super chats. Does Gorilla Hebrew understand that 12 tribe chart includes a multiplicity of Y chromosomes, which means they descend from different forefathers, i.e., not Jacob? Let me know if you need me to repeat it, because I understand it's not the one on the screen.
Yeah. Well, I have that. Well, if who asked that question?
Yeshub Ishakar.
Yeah, Yeshub. If you paid any attention to the debate, and I know you did, and I know you know my stance and argumentation because I know you know me personally, you would know, as I stated in the debate, that I do not hold to the validity of haplogroups in substantiating ancient ancestry. It's not something that I hold to, right? So asking me, do I know something in which that I don't even agree with, there's no relevance there.
Dr.
Yes,
Brown?
it's an excellent point, a very good point. Again, you can ask yourself if you want to throw out all genetic scientists worldwide and all their findings. So not only is there no literary tradition to connect these people, not only is there no genealogical connection to connect these people, no more is there a linguistic connection, historical connection, any connection. There's no genetic connection with DNA either. So of course they're not the 12 tribes, and they don't go back to Jacob. I mean, that's, again, self-evident and obvious.
Okay, that one was for Ahlazar. The next one is for Dr. Brown. This is a super chat from Tazara, and he did the format right. Thank you very much. It makes it so much easier to find your questions when you do that. You've made several appeals to DNA. Is there any verified ancient Israelite DNA to compare with modern populations? That's to Dr. Brown.
Yeah, great question. So basically what you have to do is in DNA studies, and I'm not a genetic scientist, so this is what I've learned from those who are, that you're looking for commonalities. You can find now common origin, right? Common denominator. And you keep going back and you can trace it narrower and narrower. Now the more data you have from all around the world, that enables you to trace things even further back in time. And then as you can trace things back to Middle Eastern communities that have been there through the centuries, that helps you. So yeah, this is, again, is not a specific science. The one thing I'd agree with Ahlazar that was presented from a geneticist that was accurately presented, because other things were misrepresented, is that there's not a Jewish gene. Oh, we have the Jewish gene. But you can look at the collective evidence that points to the people going all the way back in time. For example, the priestly gene or the priestly Y chromosome that's found among Lemba priests, Ashkenazi priests, Sephardi priests. And if Ahlazar is a priest, it's not guaranteed he'd have it, but at least 50% chance that he'd have that Y chromosome. That is all traced back, and it goes boom back into a common Middle Eastern ancestor 3,000 something years ago. So you can figure out who that ancestor was, right, or where it's pointing. But that's how it's done. You look at people groups that are there, people groups that have been dispersed, because there's a lot of history that tells you where people have come from, and the DNA can then confirm it.
Ahlazar, would you like to respond?
No, I will not.
Okay. Next up, I see you have one on the screen from Alton Johnson. This is to you, Ahlazar. Was Chief of Chiefs Naphtali of the original One West wrong when he said the chart was a way of lore used by Hebrew Israelites?
Alton Johnson, of course he was wrong. All you have to do is just scrutinize the clip that you watched, right? Number one, he said that Abba Bivens or Elder Bivens came up with the chart. Anybody who knows the history of One West knows Elder Bivens never proclaimed a chart. The chart comes from REI after the death of Abba Bivens. That's number one, right? Number two, the man in said video is trying to criticize the 12 tribes chart while claiming that he knows that he has descent from the tribe of Naphtali. Right. So that should take away credence from his argumentation. Then the man calls himself Chief of Chiefs. So there's clearly a motivation of him to establish himself in preeminence, which is why he's attempting to put mud on the legacy of One West. And he does it in a way that is verifiably untrue because, again, Bivens never came with the chart. The chart did not come out until after Bivens died. So that was an outright lie. And coincidentally enough, the man died shortly after making that comment.
Dr. Brown, would you like to respond?
Yeah, on the internal argument there, Ahlazar stated things as someone within the camp, so I'm the outside. I'm not going to comment on that. But as far as the origin of the chart, so if it was allegedly given to someone else, a revelation to study or to look, and then these discoveries were made, and now you keep studying and discovering. So number one, it's imperative that we look at the chart historically, look at all the histories of Israel that have ever been written. Do they point to the 12 tribes chart? Absolutely, categorically not. Right? That's the first thing. Second thing, we then look to see, okay, do the scriptures tell us who the Jewish people are? And then they do, and we can identify that. Again, you look at the ones who, in spite of persecution, suffering, being cast out around the world, still followed the God of Israel and were faithful to the traditions despite terrible suffering. It's not a mystery.
Okay. Excellent. Next question is for you, Dr. Brown, and it is from Sicarii, New Jersey, New York. Dr. Brown, why are Israelites in the Bible called Cushi, but Jewish people use that term as racial slurs towards dark-skinned people in Israel? And it's on the screen.
Right. Number one, the Israelites are not called Cushi in the Bible. In fact, they're distinguished from Cushi when God says, can a Cushite change his skin? In terms of the color, so that wasn't the Israelites. And I didn't dispute ancient black Israelites, by the way. I don't know where they came up earlier in the debate, but so they weren't called Cushi. But Cushi, it was either Sudan or Ethiopia. There are possibly two ancient Cushis in the Bible, but the one that's prominent would either have been Sudan or Ethiopia. So Ethiopia became the place that is known as Cush to this day. And sadly, there is some racism in Israel. It's absolutely true, sir, and I stand against it with you. And yes, there are some Ashkenazi Jews and others in Israel who've been racist towards Mizrahi Jews and even Sephardic Jews, and yes, Ethiopian Jews. And sometimes Ethiopian Jews have been spoken of disparagingly in that way, and it's a shame, and it's wrong, and I renounce it. Absolutely should not happen, and it's a shame it has. There's no question that racism goes in all kinds of different directions. Absolutely no question. When I find it among my own people, I'm going to categorically renounce it and denounce it. So thank you for raising it. So you're wrong about Israelites in the Bible being called Cushites. That's not correct. Any verses that allegedly point that direction absolutely certainly don't. However, you are right that there have been racial slurs against Ethiopian Jews in Israel, and many times they've been mistreated. Totally true, and I'm sorry for that.
Alhazar, would you like to respond to that?
My only response to that is to comment on racism in the modern state of Israel. Elders of mine who have traveled there frequently have said that they felt more racism in Israel than they had ever felt as being black people in the United States of America. That's all I had.
Excellent. Next question is from Karaite, Israelites for Truth. Karaite, Israelites for Truth. That's a $20 super chat, BEREAN, so we definitely want to get that one on the screen. And this is to you, Gorilla Hebrew. It says, what does your 12 tribe chart matter when the strangers, and it has in parentheses, Gentiles, can have salvation without your chart? Isaiah 56, 6 and 7. That's to you, Alhazar.
If we just take a look, let's just go to the verse in question, right? Isaiah 56, 6 to 7, right? And now it says in Isaiah 56, and also the sons of the strangers that join themselves to the Lord to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it and taketh hold of my covenant. Even then will I bring to my holy mountain and make joyful in my house of prayer. Nowhere in these verses does it even mention the term salvation. So it's totally irrelevant for you to go here to reference the salvation there. But clearly it's talking about people who are not Israelites coming and worshiping God. And at no point in time have we said that that can't happen. Of course, the house of the Lord will be a house of prayer for all nations. The ultimate goal and the end goal of the Hebrew Israelites, myself included, is that all people everywhere worship the God of Israel. Very plain and simple.
All right, Dr. Brown, would you like to respond? Do you have a
well, we share those goals that all people worship the God of Israel. I just find it odd, though, that statements can be made about you people, which would presumably include me, a lover of the God of Israel, a servant of the God of Israel, a lover of Jesus, the Messiah, that you people are going to have your heads crushed by Jesus when he returns until your brains come out. Those are the kinds of things that are so provocatory, so unnecessary, so degrading, and work against any effort to bring people into the liberating truth of the gospel. When you end up making it up, that those on the chart are somehow especially privileged, and the judgment's going to come on those not on the chart, If that's not what's meant by Ahlazar and others, then by all means clarify it, because that's what everyone seems to understand you're saying.
All right. Thank you both. Dr. Brown, here is the next one for you from Kenneth. Does Ashkenazi Jewish prescribe to Bible or Talmud?
Right. I don't know what you mean by Jewish. Ish just has to do with pertaining to. So Swedish, pertaining to Sweden, English, pertaining to England, Spanish, pertaining to Spain, Jewish, pertaining to being Jews. All right. So I don't know what you mean by that, unless it's just another slur. And even your name, Kenneth the Niger, it's interesting because there's one guy mentioned as Niger in Acts 13 because he was a black man, meaning that not all the others were black. But in any case, Ashkenazi Jews follow the Bible and the Talmud. So I differ with my fellow Jews there in terms of the authority of the Talmud. But Ashkenazi Jews would absolutely follow the Talmud, which interestingly ties them right back to the New Testament Pharisees. In other words, they are following the traditions of those who rejected Yeshua. They are following the traditions of those that ended up saying that the Pharisees had a tradition going all the way back to Moses. So, a lot of the books behind me, those are Talmudic books and things like that. So I study them to interact with my people and understand our literature. But Ashkenazi Jews follow Bible and Talmud, and I differ with many of the interpretations within the Talmud.
Alhazar, would you like to respond?
No, I know.
Okay. We're winding down. I'll get a few more in here. I see one that is for you, Alhazar. The guy sent 3 super chats, Rafa Israel. And he says this. Oh, that's Dr. Brown. I'm sorry. I thought that was, I got it backwards. I did see one for you, but that was the wrong one. I apologize. Man, this is I've never been part of a debate with this many people, which is exciting, but man, it's a lot. And so my bad about that. Hold on.
Won't he do it?
What'd you say? Oh,
I said, won't he do it?
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, no doubt, actually. Yeah. All right, okay. The next one is for you, Alhazar. Just a minute. Where did that one? It was from Dunamis. Did you guys see that one? It's from Dunamis. Okay, well, I can't find the Dunamis one. I'm gonna try to get back to this. This is from New Kingdom Nazarene, Alhazar. If the chart is just for America, how can you disqualify Jews when you don't know the history of every family who could have had some Israelite descent?
I don't know if I understand the question fully. Now we research people all over the world, so the chart is in pertinence to the North, Central, and South America. We also have other groups of people throughout the world who we've also identified as Israelites. So we study people and we study nations of people. Now, these are generalizations. I want to make this clear. We're not speaking in absolutes. These are generalizations. Of course, when we're working with displays that are there that are made to provoke people to be engaged, right? Which is the chart. What is that? What is that sound?
My bad. That's my Doberman. My bad. I'm gonna mute my mic. I'm sorry.
You're good. You good. So I'm mute. So anyway, what I was saying. Well, okay, the generalizations that needs to be understood. So the particulars of who we understand the 12 tribes to be is not expressed in the chart itself. It's expressed through the conversation when people come and ask about the chart pursuant to Ezekiel, the 37th chapter. So in understanding that, we have other people throughout the world outside of the Americas that we identify with Israel, either generally as Israelites or through particular tribes. So we definitely study the peoples of the world to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I understand that those are generalizations, but of course, as we've seen, the generalizations are false, and the attempt to tie them back into Scripture is beyond false. It's misleading, bogus, and misusing the language, and etc. But the other big thing, the Jews that we know are Jews, indisputably, that have been living in the Middle East century after century after century, and the Sephardic Jews that were not attacked as being illegitimate. So most of the population of Israel today, all those Jews are not on the chart. The ones who've lived these things out, the ones who've been in exile, the ones who God in His mercy brought back to the land. Again, some of them with a continuous presence in the same place, like exiled in Babylon and stayed there, or in Iran, Persia, and stayed there for 2,500 years. So those conspicuously are not on the chart. So the bogus ones like Hades, Levi, that's on the chart, or Native Americans or Reuben and Gad, that's on the chart. And the ones that are legitimate Jews it's indisputably legitimate through all the centuries. They're not on the chart.
All right, that's time, and that's the last question. Because as far as we agreed to about 20 minutes, it's been about 20 minutes. So, BEREAN,
do you want to go a little further, sir?
Yeah, if you're willing to, Dr. Brown, I think the people got a lot of questions, so I'm definitely willing to go a little further.
How about we take 2 more questions each? Is that good?
How about
I'm good with that.
All right, great. Thank you.
2 more questions each. Okay, so 2 more questions each. So, BEREAN, the next question would be for that one was for Dr. Brown. So the next one needs to be for Gorilla, and I believe that
No, the last one was for him.
Oh, was it? Hold on, was it?
It was about the chart, right?
You're right. It was for him because you answered.
Yeah, he was responding.
Yeah,
so okay. So that means we switch now to Dr. Brown. I'm sorry. This is tricky. There's a lot going on here.
You guys are doing a great job.
Okay, so we need one for Dr. Brown. Actually, we need one for Dr. Brown, and I saw some pretty good ones there that I was going to bring up, BEREAN. I don't know if you saw those as well. Okay, let me jump over here. This one's for Dr. Brown, right? or Ahlazar.
That's Alhazar.
Okay, it needs to be for Ahlazar. Okay, my goodness. Okay, this is one from Dunamis I was trying to get. No, but we need one for you though.
For me.
Yeah,
I'm sure you got plenty there for me. With all the
there it is. Okay.
You got
Here's
plenty
one
for me.
This is JL Tart 70 super chat. This is for Dr. Brown. If I'm not mistaken, part of your rebuttal against Guerrilla Hebrew was on the Levites and keeping the commandments. What about Ezekiel 44? Most Levi were not righteous.
Right. So thank you. And I didn't respond to that in real time. So I appreciate you bringing that back up. The first thing, Ezekiel 44 is a future picture in the millennial kingdom after the Messiah returns and establishes his kingdom in Jerusalem and the future temple, etc. These things that will unfold. So yes, those are things that pertain to the Levites because often through history they've been unfaithful. However, it doesn't say that all were unfaithful for all time. Rather, there were certain ones that were faithful. So if the Haitians are the Levites, then show me over the centuries where the Haitians have been teaching Israel. Because remember, we're supposed to look to the Torah, and the Torah is going to tell us who the people are. And the Torah tells us explicitly in Deuteronomy 33 that Haiti will be teaching Israel the laws and commandments. So when you have the Haitian people as a whole, not observing the Sabbath, not circumcising their sons on the 8th day, not observing biblically kosher food, not even knowing the Torah, let alone teaching the Torah to the tribes of Israel, it can't be Haiti. So you have to look for where is that presence, because Ezekiel is also telling us about the faithful priests, the faithful Levites through the centuries. All right. So where are they? Well, I'm saying you could find them among Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi Jews through the century. No mystery, but you can't find them among the Haitian people through the centuries.
Okay.
We lost Vocab.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here. Okay.
Yeah, so it's over to Alhazar if he wants to respond.
Okay, Alhazar, do you want to take a minute to respond?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. So we take a look at the prophecies, like he said, about a discontinuity from the priesthood, a discontinuity from the knowledge of being Israelites. All these things are very present in prophecy. So with all of that being, especially when we take a look at like Malachi 2 or what it says of the Levites, of the priests. So that and all of the prophecies about us losing, the Israelites losing and discontinuing and things like that from the heritage, that's all that's evidence of. But we do have a continuity of righteous priests who have been teaching the law, statutes, and commandments to Israel. I'm one of them, and there's ones that precede me. Big up to people like elder priest Kahan and things of that nature. So that's definitely very present. But even on the left side, even if we take it on the left, when Israel went into wickedness, when they went into witchcraft, even amongst the Brujas and Santeria and things like that, everybody knows you have to go to Haitians to learn how to perform sacrifices. This is well known throughout the Caribbean, well known in Haitian botanicas all over the place, right? So anybody who's of any Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, or any Dominican descent like that, they'll tell you, the Brazilian, they'll tell you that, right? So I believe certainly we are the Levites.
All right, thank you. So that was for Dr. Brown, and then you responded. This one is for you, Guerrilla Hebrew, from Dunamis. How many curses does a group need to face to show and prove they are under the curses of Deuteronomy 28?
I would say a multiplicity. I won't put an absolute number on it by no means. I think you'd have to observe and take a case by case basis of looking at people and making an analysis.
Yeah. So in point of fact, you could point to all kinds of people who've suffered terribly. And again, I don't downplay the sufferings of African Americans and the horror of the slave trade. I don't downplay the suffering of Native Americans and the injustices that were done to them. I don't downplay the suffering of the Uyghur people in China right now. Many people suffering, but Jews through history uniquely have suffered as Jews. My ancestors as Jews were put out of country because they were Jews and because they were identified with the God of Israel, and therefore they were hated and persecuted for it. So when you just look historically, tragically, these curses have come upon us. Nothing to boast about. If we had heeded Moses and the prophets and the Messiah, these things wouldn't have come upon us. But tragically, they have. And there are Jewish history books that go through the curses and look at how they've unfolded. It's heartbreaking. It really is.
Okay. Looks like we got, I think, two more left because we've done one for each. Is that right?
Yep. Okay.
They got one on the screen for you, Dr. Brown. Last one. Dr. Brown, when did the Jews in Israel fulfilled Jeremiah 50, 33 through 34. It's from JIB for Dr. Brown. When did the Jews in Israel fulfill Jeremiah 50, 33 through 34? And BEREAN, if you could please leave the question on the screen as he answers. That way people know what's referred to. And then look for the next one, which will be the last one for Ahlazar. But try not to put it on there until he's done answering. That way people know what's going on. Okay, Dr. Brown, you got 2 minutes.
All right, so let me read the text. Thus said the Lord of hosts, the people of Israel are oppressed. So speaking of ancient Israel, again, Jeremiah is prophesying over 2,500 years ago. His ministry begins in the 13th year of Josiah, which would place it around 627 BC. So he's prophesying well over 2,500 years ago. Thus said the Lord of hosts, the people of Israel are oppressed, and so too the people of Judah. All their captors held them. They refused to let them go. Right, so this happened over time as the Jewish people and the tribes were in exile. The Redeemer is mighty. His name is Lord of hosts. He will champion their cause so as to give rest to the earth and unrest to the inhabitants of Babylon. So number one, the Jewish people were brought back from Babylon. Now, some remain there, and they remained there for over 2,500 years with a continuous community. But otherwise, exiles did come back, as recounted in many of the Old Testament books. And the Babylonian kingdom was subdued and did fall to the Medo-Persian kingdom that followed. So this did happen. However, there seems to be a final fulfillment that's being pointed to as well. It could just be rest came to the land when the Jewish people returned, but there could be a final destruction of an enemy, Babylon, that brings rest to the whole earth. But historically, this happened when the Jewish people were brought back from exile and rest came to the land of Israel, so to the earth, to the land of Israel, and judgment came on the kingdom of Babylon.
Vocab, you muted.
Would you like to follow up? You would have a minute if you want to.
Yeah, I definitely do. So, Dr. Michael Brown just notated that there could potentially be a future enemy of the world, Babylon, and that's the position that I would take here in Jeremiah 50. And this part of Jeremiah, I believe, is actually in reference to mystery Babylon and not the present Babylon that he was experiencing. And a key reason why is here in verse 33, thus saith the Lord of hosts, Yahweh Tazabah, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, right? So I believe this is in reference to the mystery Babylon, which presently so-called Hispanics and so-called Black people are receiving a collective oppression in, right? So this redemption is actually going to be through Christ delivering us out of captivity and bringing us back to our homeland of Israel.
He's muted.
I'm trying to mute it when they speak, and then it's okay. My bad. Okay, last one for you, Guerrilla Hebrew, from Rise Up Israel, and it says this: Dr. Brown said in his closing argument that Christ is not judging based on race. Can you explain who that is in Numbers 24:17 through 20?
Most certainly, it's one of my favorite prophecies here. So we see in Numbers 24, starting at 17, I shall see him, but not now. So this is a prophecy, obviously. I believe this is Balaam as well. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob. We believe that star to be Christ, the Messiah, Yahushua. And a scepter shall rise out of Israel, symbolic of his rulership. And he shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Sheth. And Edom shall be his possession, and Seir also shall be his possession. So he's going to smite the Moabites. He's going to captivate the Edomites, right? And out of Jacob shall come he that shall have dominion, and shall destroy he that remaineth in the city. I believe that that's talking about the people who are there in the land of Israel who don't belong there. And he looked on Amalek and took up this proverb. And Amalek was first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he shall perish forever. So I believe that this is actually talking about Christ returning and judging specific nations of people on behalf of vengeance from God on Israel and on Israel's enemies and oppressors.
All right. Yeah, okay, you got a minute. Go ahead.
So first, we know that the gospel goes into all nations and all kingdoms, and the Great Commission is to make disciples of all peoples. That means there will be disciples among the Moabites and the people of Edom and others. So that's the first thing. It can't simply mean that whoever is allegedly of Moabite or Edomite descent will get destroyed. Secondly, 2 Thessalonians 1 says that the judgment will come on those who do not obey the gospel, not based on ethnicity. So that's very clear throughout the Bible. Also in Isaiah, the 2nd chapter, all nations will come streaming to Jerusalem to worship the God of Israel. And we heard that Jerusalem will be a house of prayer for all peoples. Right, that includes these as well. Many also recognize, commentators, that Moab and Seth and Edom there are also representative of hostile powers. And that's how it's unfolded through history. So the hostile powers will be destroyed, but it's not going to be based on ethnicity. I might as well say that blacks will be destroyed or Hispanics will be destroyed. That would be just as bigoted and unfair and untrue.
All right, thank you. That is our time, and that's all the questions we can get to. I know there's a lot more, but you guys have to do a follow-up show or something. That's it for me. I'll let you do what you got to do. I'm gonna go out. Thanks everybody, and I think it went great, and I look forward to the chatter afterwards. God bless. Peace.
All right, God.